Chapter 2470. He had been shy before, even if Gu Shijio and Di Fuyi's abilities could prevent the little devils from hurting them. Once an alarm was sounded, Yin Yanli's subordinates would enter into his lair, and they would not be able to hide anymore. Hence, it was necessary to subdue them. After he was done with the little devils, Di Fuyi started to store the unaffected spiritual crystals into his own storage space and left the guarded crystals untouched so as not to alarm anyone. Meanwhile, Gu Shijio had already found a secret door for them to continue moving forward. To open this door, one had to possess at least a level 9 spiritual power. In the past, Gu Shijio was unable to open the door, but this time she could. She opened the secret door in just a few seconds and found a pathway made with jade behind the door. This jade could absorb all the light in the area, so when the door was opened, the hallway looked completely dark. There seemed to be a draft of cold wind circulating inside the hallway. Even though the wind was not strong, the cold wind seemed to get straight into the bones. Gu Shijio shivered, and the hair on her back was standing in unison. Di Fuyi pulled her behind him and said, "Don't rush. Follow me." He raised his hand and created a small wizardry barrier around her body. The barrier was able to shield her from the cold wind. This man really treated her like a prized porcelain doll. Gu Shijio looked at his broad shoulders and muscular figure from the back and was impressed. However, she also found it somewhat weird. It was just a gust of wind. He was really overreacting. Did he really think that she was so weak? Nonetheless, it felt so good to be protected by her sweetheart. Gu Shijio put her face on his back and embraced his waist with her arms. "Fuyi, I really love you." Di Fuyi was stunned for a moment. After a brief pause, he simply nodded in response. It was completely out of her expectations to see him acknowledge her sweet words so nonchalantly. The man was so playful, and she definitely expected him to respond sweetly. Did he not like her to be so open about her feelings? The lady was not very open about her feelings, but she could feel how much Di Fuyi cared for her. Nonetheless, the awkward response made her regret her action. She wanted to pull her hands away from his waist, but he held her wrists and did not let go. Although the entire place was dark, Gu's Zygius abilities allowed her to see everything clearly. She saw that Di Fuyi's ears were slightly reddish. She also realized that the palms that were holding her hands were very hot. It was as if an iron was on her hands. Was this guy embarrassed? He had been shy before. With that note, Gu Shijio could not help but smile. She was not a very expressive person, but when she was with him, she was always inexplicably happy. If she were not worried about the abrupt changes that were expected to hit him, she would have been even happier. "How do you feel?" Gu Shijio asked softly. "Very good," Di Fuyi whispered to her. "Stupid. I want to know about your condition. Do you feel any pain?" "Not yet." Gu Shijio breathed a sigh of relief. "Perhaps the poison has been digested by your body and will not erupt any further. After all, if I am not mistaken, the purple cloud mushroom is the spiritual power from your past life." "Maybe." Di Fuyi felt a gentle warmth in his body the entire time he was with Gu Shijio. It felt just like a breeze in the spring. Everything was going well for him. Even the wound he suffered before from extracting blood directly from the heart was now healed. No scars were left from the injury. In stark contrast, the wind in the passage was freezing cold. As Di Fuyi stayed in front, he shielded the wind from Gu Shijio, but understood why there were no traps along the pathway. This wind itself would have been able to keep away a significant number of people. The reasons why Di Fuyi could stand the cold were due to his unique physique and high spiritual power relative to the other people in the Shura world. In order to ensure that Gu Shijio was really protected, he had even placed a wizardry barrier over her body that could diminish the effects of the wind. Curious about the nature of the cold wind, Di Fuyi inhaled a deep breath and frowned. The wind seemed to be the yin aura of the place, and it was certainly powerful. Then, he was trying to guess what could be waiting for them at the end of the path. At the end of the trail, Gu Shijio had not expected to see what appeared to be a glimpse of the galaxy. The view was so vast that they could not even see the borders at a glance. However, although it looked like a galaxy, what they saw was not actually the stars. They were spiritual crystals arranged in a unique array. These spiritual crystals seemed to be naturally very bright. Therefore, when they were placed in this dark abyss, they looked even more brilliant, just like the stars. Upon closer observation, the couple found that there was a dark red station under each of the crystals. As the surrounding was unlit, they could not see the base at first glance. Furthermore, the spiritual crystals were arranged just like a starry night sky. The crystals densely covered the sky, and the end could not be seen. In the central part of the galaxy, there was a small high platform that was built with gongs. It looked like a small moon that was rotating slowly in the middle of the galaxy. This view was stunning. One could easily feel as though they were up in the sky for a moment. Meanwhile, the cold wind was still present. In fact, the closer they got to the galaxy, the stronger the wind. Di Fuyi's robe fluttered frantically while they were there. Gu Shijio was caught in the moment, but after regaining her senses, she felt that this view of the galaxy was somewhat familiar to her. She was certain that she had seen it before. She also realized that the aura in the place gave her a dark and ominous feeling. The wind almost felt like the cries of the dead. Although she was protected by the wizardry barriers set up by Di Fuyi, she could still sense the extreme chill in the surrounding once they reached this place. Afraid that she was missing some details, Gu Shijio used a spell to sharpen her vision of the galaxy. After observing everything here, she shuddered. These were wraiths. They seemed to be shielding the spiritual crystals or trapped in them. Either way, they must be the reason for the cold wind. These evil spirits were generally red in color. In fact, the more powerful they were, the redder they would appear. Oddly enough, the evil spirits here were pale. It was usually the grievances of the wraiths that caused them to be red. Had these spirits died without suffering? Or had it somehow been sucked away by the crystals and merged into the high red platform at the center? What is this array? Gu Shijio whispered and asked the firmament stone on her wrist. The firmament stone was also confused. I don't know. There's nothing about this place in my information bank. Even the worldly firmament stone could not recognize it. Therefore, it seemed like this array was extremely rare. Gu Shijio was about to reply to it, but Di Fuyi suddenly grabbed her. Quickly, teleport us there. Gu Shijio did not even question Di Fuyi and immediately teleported to the direction in which he pointed. Apparently, they had walked into a deadly corner of the formation. Just when they left, the evil wraiths suddenly burst into the scene at the place where they were initially standing. Chapter 2472. Rearranging the starry array, many black shadows were flying around the place all of a sudden, and Gu Zijia's hands turned cold almost instantly. Those shadows were young bloody bats. There seemed to be more than 1,000 of them flying around the galaxy replica, as if they were trying to absorb something. However, they must have been alarmed by something in the vicinity because they suddenly flew out of the area all at once, which felt as though a whirlwind was leaving the place. Gu Shijio held her breath the entire time as she watched the bats exit the place from where she and Di Fuyi were standing. Had they not teleported away in time, they would have to face the wrath of the bats head-on. Instead, they were now in hiding in a quiet part of the array. To ensure their safety, Di Fuyi had cast a spell to conceal their breaths so that the bats would not be able to track them. Was this the home of the bloody bats? Were they off to this time? Gu Shijio and Di Fuyi looked at each other in hopes that the other would have a clue. Gu Shijio asked, "Should we follow the bats?" Di Fuyi was looking at the starry array and did not know what to think. Being lost in his thoughts, he did not even hear Gu Shijio. Hence, she poked his waist and asked, "What's wrong?" Di Fuyi regained his senses and whispered to her, "This starry array seems to be a bit familiar." He was certain that he had seen it somewhere, but possibly in a slightly different arrangement. When he saw the stars, he had a sudden urge to rearrange them. It was as if something possessed him to put things in order. He turned to ask Gu Shijio, "When you were on Earth, did you ever make any starry arrays?" Gu Shijio shook her head. "No, but I have always watched the stars." "What about Huang too?" Di Fuyi asked. Gu Shijio was stunned by his question. I don't remember." Di Fuyi knocked his forehead with his palm. Was this part of his past that he could not remember? Thinking logically about the matter, He realized that despite Huang Tu's obvious abilities in the past, he was just the lord of the human world. Hence, he should now know how to form a starry array. Furthermore, if he knew how to do it, he would certainly have taught Gu Shijio. So what was the memory in Di Fui's mind? Help! Someone could be heard calling for help from afar. Gu Shijio was stunned by the voice. It seemed to come from the direction where the bats had gone. She pulled Di Fui along as she said, "Let's go and have a look." Before Di Fui could even reply to her, she had teleported with him to the direction of the voice she had heard. Because of her mastery over her teleportation technique, she could estimate locations very precisely. Soon, she found herself on a trigram-shaped platform with 18 pillars surrounding the area. There was a person tied to each pillar. To be more accurate, there were skeletons tied to each pillar, as the people who were there had been killed by the bloody bats that swarmed over. Their fleshes were clearly eaten away. Gu Shijio managed to take a glimpse of the bats in the area and noticed that their skin had turned from black to bright red after they entered this part of the cave. Although the place was too dark for Gu Shijio to see every detail, she noticed that the bats had turned their attention to something above them. Hence, she simply followed them up and found that there was a hidden passage above them, which led to the outside. There was a jungle outside, and they could hear the roaring of beasts that seemed to be charging at one another. It seemed that this place was the origin of the bloody bats. The starry array was the culprit. Gu Shijio clenched her fists in indignation. Di Fui held her little hand that was clenched and said, "Let's go back inside first." Okay. Gu Shijio teleported back inside with Di Fui. The two stood in front of the starry array again to try to figure it out. Upon contemplation, Gu Shijio said, "Let's destroy this starry array. We must stop all the trouble it is causing." When she was just about to perform a spell, Di Fui quickly grabbed her hand. "Hold on. This array also supports the wizardry barrier outside the place. The bloody rain is raging outside right now. If we destroy it, the people of this city will be sacrificed." Gu Shijio was stunned by his remark, and sweat started pouring all over her forehead. She had completely forgotten about the people in the city. She rubbed her eyebrows in disappointment and wondered what had happened to her recently. She was not as sharp as she used to be in the past. As she could not destroy it, for the time being, she gazed at the starry array, trying to figure out her next move. She was somewhat unhappy by the sight and asked, "Are we going to let the bats continue to hurt the people and animals here?" Di Fui was silent for a moment. He had been devising a plan the whole time. "I could try to rearrange the starry array. Perhaps I could support the wizardry barrier while and also stop the bats from going out of control." Gu Zijia's eyes were gleaming with inspiration. She was surprised that Di Fui was so knowledgeable. "Did the Divine Lord teach you this?" Di Fui replied, "No, I never had a teacher in this field." Gu Shijio was rendered speechless by his reply. Di Fui began to wander around the starry array, with his fingers pointing around the place as if he was calculating something. As Gu Shijio did not know what he was up to, she merely followed him and kept quiet so as not to distract him. Instead, she fended off any wraiths that came near to him. When she came close to the base of the array, Gu Shijio realized that the spiritual crystal seemed to be connected to the ground. She tried to push one of the crystals, but it would not move. She quickly shared this finding with Di Fui. "I am afraid that the array cannot be rearranged." Di Fui seemed to shake his head slightly. "If you try to move it with force, it cannot be moved. However, with the right amount of force and technique, it should work." Apparently, he had already mastered the force and technique as He flew up to the moonlight platform and started to work. Like playing a game of chess, he lifted his sleeves and waved them in a specific direction on a spiritual crystal. In an instant, the spiritual crystal and the base below it moved silently. Everything happened very swiftly and gracefully. It was a dazzling sight. Standing near to Di Fui, Gu Shijio somehow felt a sense of familiarity with the situation. It was almost as if she had seen him doing the same thing in his past life. Did it really happen in the past? Perhaps Huang Tu had set up a starry array before, which left some residual memories in her mind. Being a master of array formations, Gu Shijio could easily remember any arrays that she encountered before. However, she seemed a little dizzy with the one that Di Fui was rearranging now. The more she looked at it, the dizzier she got. She decided to take a few steps back and watch him on the high platform. Even though they were not very far apart, Gu Shijio suddenly felt as though there was a gap between them. Perhaps it was not about the actual distance between them, but she somehow felt that no one could stand side by side with Di Fui. He was such a remarkable being with knowledge and abilities that were unparalleled. She could only watch him in awe. She suspected that she had been doing so for many years in their past life. Even though it was good to be with someone so worldly, Gu Shijio did not have a very good feeling about the situation. Nevertheless, now was not the right time to think about it. She quickly shook her head and started to calculate the time they had spent in the cave. It had been more than 4 hours. Does that mean the bottled-up spiritual power inside Di Fui's body had somehow passed? As she pondered on the situation, she noticed that Di Fui suddenly lost his balance and almost swayed off the high platform. She was shocked and quickly teleported over and catch him. But the moment she held his arm, her heart sank. The changes in his body had started taking effect. His arms were hot, and his body was hot too. His face was faintly red, but sweat could be seen all over his forehead. Master, his body is reacting. The firmament stone flashed a message in her mind. Swiftly, it attached itself to Di Fui's wrist in an attempt to absorb the overflowing spiritual power from his body. Once it attached itself to Di Fui's wrist, it immediately felt as though it was being scalded. Unable to suppress the pain, it quickly told Gu Shijio, "Master, I am afraid that I can't take it much longer. You must." Gu Shijio did not give it the option to withdraw. Di Fui seemed to be in excruciating pain as well. He was trembling in pain, but still tried hard to resist the effects. Gu Shijio was trying to put his body in a suitable position to meditate, but he shook his head at her attempt. "I still have the last 2. He lifted his sleeve again, but he did not seem to have control over his hands. Therefore, he was unable to put together a spell with his fingers. "You have to meditate now. Forget about the array." Gu Shijio looked at his drenched forehead and grew anxious. "No. If I let it be, this place will still exist, and who knows what disaster will strike next. I must move." Di Fui was determined to finish his work. He was just 2 moves away. "Tell me how to move them. Let me do it." Gu Shijio was also determined to make sure Di Fui stayed alive. To move this, you need to be at least at the level of a golden immortal. Otherwise, the grievances inside the crystals will consume you. Di Fui did not want her to take the risk. Gu Shijio took a deep breath and was not ready to risk his life either. "Let me try." She had already seen the spiritual crystal that Di Fui wanted to move, so she pinched her fingers together to cast a spell. It was actually the same spell that Di Fui had used. "Quickly tell me the method to move it." "Let me try." At this moment, the spiritual power in Di Fui's body all haywire. He couldn't control the spiritual crystals anymore. He saw that Gu Shijio could actually cast the spell, and that she was determined to make it work. If he did not give her a chance, she would certainly be furious at him. "All right, I will tell you the steps, but if anything seems wrong, please stop." Di Fui then told her how to move the crystals, and also told her where the 2 crystals needed to be placed. Gu Shijio needed to recite some kind of rhyme to complete the process. Although it was not long, it was certainly rather strange. Despite Gu Zijia's wealth of experiences, even she did not understand it. Fortunately, she just needed to recite it and did not need to understand it. As Gu Shijio was undoubtedly intelligent, she managed to remember everything and started moving the crystals. However, she was nowhere near as graceful as Di Fui. When he moved these crystals earlier, it seemed like they were weightless as his movements were free and easy. However, Gu Shijio did not have the same experience. Moving the small crystals felt as though she was trying to move a mountain. She needed to use all her strength. She felt like an ant that was trying to push an elephant. The grievances attached to the crystal were very reluctant to be moved. They had used their strength to stay in place as well. Gu Shijio had been sweating all over, but only managed to move one of the crystals a little. Unfortunately, the crystal was still several feet away from its intended location. Gu Shijio frowned in disappointment. Judging from the difficulties that she was facing, it would take her several hours to move both crystals to their intended locations. That was assuming that she would even have any spiritual power left in her body to continue to move it. The firmament stone suddenly flew over and attached itself to her wrist. "Master, my spiritual power has reached its capacity. Let me transfer some spiritual power to you." Chapter 2475. Rearranging the Starry Array. 4. Without waiting for a response from Gu Shijio, it began transferring the spiritual power that it had absorbed from Di Fui. The sudden absorption of spiritual power was overbearing for the firmament stone, and it was eager to channel some of it away. While the spiritual power was being transferred, Gu Shijio felt as though her veins were swelling up all around her body. It was a truly painful experience. The sheer discomfort that Gu Shijio experienced from absorbing the excess spiritual power from the firmament stone made Gu Shijio wonder how much pain Di Fui had been enduring. She decided to check on him and found that he was sitting like a Buddha in an attempt to meditate. She was a little relieved by the sight. In that brief moment, the firmament stone managed to transfer a significant amount of spiritual power to Gu Shijio. In fact, she was worried that she would be able to experience a breakthrough in her power. Her original spiritual power was at level 9. 2. However, it became apparent to her that she was about to reach level 9. Once she passed the level of 9, she would reach level 10 and experience a catastrophe that would possibly allow her to ascend to heaven. However, now is definitely not the right time for her to ascend. It will certainly attract Yun Yanli's attention, and he would be here in no time. Thinking on her feet, Gu Shijio immediately channeled the power she was receiving towards moving the spiritual crystal that she had been working tirelessly to rearrange. Due to the improvement in her spiritual power, she managed to move the crystal a little faster than before. Also, she managed to reduce the level of spiritual power in her body. Soon, the firmament stone had transmitted all the spiritual power it had absorbed from Di Fui into her body. It felt a bit tired, but since it now had the capacity to help Di Fui again, it quickly attached itself to his wrist and continued to absorb his spiritual power. It suddenly felt as though it was a device that could transfer spiritual power from one being to another. Although the procedure was tiring, the firmament stone had no other options. It continued to push itself, and without knowing, an hour had passed. In that time, Gu Shijio finally managed to move the two spiritual crystal to their designated locations. The very moment that it happened, the cold wind that had been flowing in between the crystals suddenly disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a faint, lukewarm wind that whirled in between the crystals as if it was comforting the suffering wraiths. The calm that replaced the stormy winds from before gave Gu Shijio the assurance she needed that she was successful. There was no need for her to disturb Di Fui to confirm it. As usual, Gu Shijio achieved the impossible by performing a task that only a golden immortal could do. Triumphantly, she cheered, "Success! How can I?" Upon looking at Di Fui, she stopped before she finished the sentence. Di Fui was still sitting there quietly. He was as still as a mountain, which made him look just like a statue. Gu Zijia's heart suddenly sank from the jubilant rush that she had moments ago. She rushed over and put her hand on his shoulder. "Fui." Upon touching him, she realized that his body was cold and hard. It felt nothing like touching human skin. In fact, it almost felt as though she was touching a piece of jade. Did he become a statue? Startled by this discovery, she quickly checked his entire body and realized that he had become a jade statue. The details on the status were extremely realistic. Even his eyelashes were clearly defined. But how could he become a jade statue? Did Di Fui leave a jade statue here before he left? It was impossible. Gu Shijio was confident that he would not leave her behind here. But if that were the case, was this statue really Di Fui? Chapter 2476. Would it be too cumbersome? Gu Shijio subconsciously looked at her wrist. Fortunately, the firmament stone was still attached to it. It had been quiet for the last half hour, having constantly moved from D. Fuyi's wrist to Gu Zijia's wrist to transfer over D. Fuyi's spiritual power. Being so focused on moving the crystals from before, and she had not paid any attention to it. Little Tsang, what happened to D. Fuyi? The firmament stone did not respond. Had it also turned into a stone? Gu Shijio flicked it with her fingers. Talk. The firmament stone did not flash. Perhaps it was too tired and had shut down. Her attention turned back to the jade statue, and she suddenly realized something. D. Fuyi was originally wearing a purple robe, but this jade statue was wearing a white robe. The material of the robe was also rather strange. It was not silk, but when she touched it, the material felt very smooth and warm. The bottom part of the robe was also designed in a rather unique fashion. It did not have dragons or phoenixes or flowers. Instead, it merely looked like the sun and the moon with a collection of stars. It was rather impressive and made him look as though he was a person of noble status. Was this really D. Fuyi? Was he so uncomfortable before that he found the need to change his attire? What was going on here? Gu Shijio felt rather panicked by the perplexing turn of events. She leaned on his chest and tried to listen for a heartbeat, but did not detect anything. After all, the figure in front of him was a statue. She called out to him, but he did not answer either. Did someone kidnap D. Fuyi and leave a statue behind to deceive her? She took a deep breath and tried to calm her mind as she started to think about D. Fuyi's features. The man had a good physique. Although he had been injured several times since he was young, none of the injuries left any scars on his body. It was perfect. In fact, it was too perfect that Gu Shijio could not even tell if this was really him. All of a sudden, she recalled that there was a birthmark on top of his left thigh. The place was so private that if she had never had sex with him, she would never know that it existed. Hence, if someone tried to make a replica statue of him, the birthmark would probably be missing. However, to check the specific area, Gu Shijio needed to remove his clothing. Unconvinced, Gu Shijio stood there, contemplating whether she should remove his clothes. Would it be too cumbersome if she stripped it off? Nonetheless, if she did not, how would she be able to verify whether this statue was really D. Fuyi? Furthermore, since no one was around, it seemed like there was no downside. Hence, she went ahead and removed his robe. The moon was extraordinarily bright during the mid-autumn season of the year. In fact, it was time for the annual Mid-Autumn Festival. The round moon had risen high in the sky and was clear and bright. The clouds looked like pieces of cotton wrapped around the moon. It was certainly a breathtaking sight. On the bank of Taihu Lake, the moon was reflected onto the lake. It looked somewhat mysterious when ripples scattered the surface. Meanwhile, the surrounding streets were sprinkled with bright lights everywhere. There was a mountain peak in the middle of Taihu Lake. Although the peak was not very high, it was an excellent place to watch the moon. In a small pavilion on the peak, two people were sitting opposite each other. There were a few pastries and side dishes laid on the table in front of them, along with a jug of wine. Chapter 2477. To come up with this idea, there were a man and a woman at the pavilion. The woman was dressed in red, while the man was dressed in white. Their appearances were undoubtedly stunning. Perhaps their attractiveness would catch anyone's attention. However, even though many people came to the peak of the mountain, none of them could see them. Apparently, they had set up a wizardry barrier around them. Leisurely, the man took a moment to observe the scenery around him. He sighed. "Shuema, this is the modern life that you have been thinking about. Other than the slightly fancy lights and taller buildings, there is nothing special about this place. My divine lord, you have not fully understood my view of this place. The moon is always brighter at home. This is my home. Of course, I naturally think that it is the best place. You and I have finally come to this world in time for the Mid-Autumn Festival on August 15th. It is the day meant for family reunions. Can you be a little more positive?" The man and woman at the pavilion were Shun Jiuli and Ning Shuema. In their adventures of traveling through time and space, they inadvertently fell into the wormhole and ended up in the modern world. As it was right about the time of the Mid-Autumn Festival, Ning Shuma took Shunjuli to the Taihu Lake to celebrate the festival. Shunjuli was a person who enjoyed the tranquility as opposed to large crowds. So Ning Shuma brought him to the peak of the mountain to enjoy the view of the moon. It would have been good if Nianma was here. Ning Shuma took a sip of wine and sighed after uttering her previous sentence. She still missed her son. In fact, she wanted to head to the Shuro world to check on him. However, the Divine Lord did not let her go. He said that this was a challenge that Nianma had to endure on his own. Otherwise, it would create a bigger mess. Therefore, Ning Shuma had to ignore her desire. Nonetheless, to alleviate her concerns, Shunjuli occasionally opened a unique water mirror to check on the status of their son. The water mirror was developed by Shunjuli and proved to be very useful. However, the first time he opened the mirror, he was stunned by what he saw. He saw himself. But to be accurate, he actually saw an imitation of himself by Di Fuya's comrade. As Kuan Shui was very talented, his impersonation of the Divine Lord was very accurate. Ning Shuma could not help but praise the creature. He looks really similar to you. Of course, she could not help but take the opportunity to praise her son too. Our son is really clever to have come up with this idea. She then looked at Yin Yanli and frowned. What strange practices has this man been using? His skills have improved so quickly. He is already at the level of a great deity. Shunjuli looked calm. This is the work of the ancient sorcerer. Do you remember Luo Jiuchen? He created a peerless killer in a matter of months that almost destroyed the world. Yin Yanli is like an upgraded version of that peerless monster. Do you think Luo Jiuchen is the person behind this mess? Ning Shuma shook her head. Luo Jiuchen has locked away. When Nianma was born, he was only released for a brief moment. He was sealed away very shortly after that. According to my estimations, he would not have had any interactions with Yin Yanli. Shunjuli nodded. You are right. Perhaps someone else is behind all this craziness. Ning Shuma felt rather uneasy at the thought of it. Divine Lord, Nianma's spiritual power is too low. He might not be able to deal with Yin Yanli. Furthermore, if there is someone more powerful behind the scenes, I am afraid that. Why don't we go to the Shuro world now to intervene? Shunjuli's fingertips seemed to have moved in a motion that suggested he was counting something. He then shook his head once he was done. No, Shuema, this is Nianmo's challenge. You and I cannot intervene. Otherwise, the situation will be worse. Will he be able to pass through this disaster? Shunjuli smiled and only said 2 words, don't worry. He closed the water mirror abruptly and changed the topic. Even though Shunjuli could keep his calm, Ning Shuema still felt uncomfortable about the events around her son. After barely a few hours, she brought up the topic again and asked Shunjuli to open the water mirror so that they could check on their son. She claimed that this festival required a reunion, and even though they could not physically meet, the least they could do was to observe their son through the water mirror. Shunjuli did not want to argue with her, so he opened the mirror again. The image that appeared on the mirror was Di Fui and Gu Shijio looking at the starry array. His parents also observed the starry array for some time to try to decipher its mechanisms. Ning Shuma was the great devil, so when she saw the wraiths attached to the spiritual crystals, she frowned. She then asked Shunjuli, what is this sorcery? It looks so evil. No wonder the Shuro world has no spiritual energy. This array has been absorbing all of its energy, and if my guesses are right, there are more than one of these arrays in the Shuro world. In fact, there should be at least 8 more that are sucking out the spiritual energy in the place and transferring it to the man behind the scenes. Well, it is no surprise that Yin Yanli has managed to develop so quickly. Can you crack it? Ning Shuma was a master in array formations, but this array made her feel rather uncomfortable. Shunjilu pondered for a moment. With our skills, it is not difficult to crack it. We can demolish it and also help the souls find peace. However, if we do so, it would be harmful to the entire Shuro world, because we don't know what this array is connected to over there. Perhaps it will affect the balance in the place. While discussing over their wine and food, They could also hear the audio around Di Fui. Hence, the dialogue between Gu Shijio and Di Fui was audible to them. In the process, Ning Xuanma heard Di Fui address Gu Shijio as baby, and she could not help but giggle. Miss Gu should be 1,000 years old, right? On the other hand, Nianma is so young. She should be the one who addresses him as baby. Shunjili took a sip of wine before responding. This girl is actually only 200 years old, while Nianma, well, he used to be much older than her. Used to? Ning Xuanma clearly caught the key message. Do you mean that Nianma is the reincarnation of someone from Gu Zijia's past? Shunjili paused for a moment. He had to figure out if he was allowed to tell his wife the truth. Ning Xuanma pulled his sleeve in anticipation. Don't be so hesitant. Be direct with me. In a bid to satisfy her demand while protecting the heavenly secret, Shunjili responded smartly. Nianma was Gu Zijia's better half in his past life. Ning Xuanma remained silent, but she seemed to connect some dots automatically. Was he also called Di Fui in the past? Yes. No wonder you agreed for him to change his name, even his surname. Ning Xuanma had heard something about Gu Shijio, but she needed clarification. She has always been looking for a person in the upper bound. Was the person Nianma? Why did she not recognize him at first? In Nianmo's past life, the heavenly laws erased all memories about him. Naturally, Miss Gu could not remember him as well. She was merely looking for him using her instincts. Shunjili sighed before continuing. They were extremely close in his past life. Ning Xuanma kept silent for a considerably long time. Nonetheless, she kept her eyes on their son. I have always felt that Nianma does not look like you or me. Could it be that his current appearance is how he used to look like in his past life? Shunjili faintly replied, no matter which couple gives birth to Nianma, he will not change his appearance. This is his original appearance. Ning Xuanma was stunned. Was her son really that powerful? He must possess very unique genes, if even the Divine Lord and Great Devil's genes combined could not change him. Chapter 2479. He felt that he had lived for too long. Who was he in his past life? While both of them were discussing, Di Fui had begun to rearrange the starry array. Ning Xuanma had her eyes wide open as she watched her son on the high platform. He actually knows how to rearrange this starry array. Shunjili found it quite captivating as well, but was not as surprised as his wife. He said, it's not unexpected. This is what he used to do. Shunjili had suspected that his son had slowly regained his memories as the Lord on earth. However, it seemed that he recalled his memories as the master of heavenly law first. Things just kept getting more and more interesting. It would appear that the purple cloud mushroom that Gu Shijio let him eat seemed to be very useful in the end. Being an expert in array formations, Shunjili could naturally understand the layout of the array made by Di Fui. He was truly amazed. Ning Xuanma was also very proud of her son. I didn't expect him to be able to put together such a complicated starry array. She was not aware that Di Fui used to chart the fate of the world in his past life. This starry array had almost 10,000 of spiritual crystal. However, Di Fui was used to playing around with 100 million stars. Needless to say, it was many times more complicated than this one. This was probably just a children's toy for him. That being said, the boy had not discovered his true identity yet. Otherwise, he would not even show the slightest fear if he had to face 10 Yunyanlis. Shunjili was still rather surprised that Yunyanli dared to challenge Di Fui. Perhaps he felt that he had lived for too long. Shunjili silently lit up a candle for Yunyanli in his heart. If Yunyanli only offended him, he would be kind enough just to kill him and let him be reincarnated. However, the person that Yunyanli was messing with now, he could foresee that Yunyanli would suffer from a miserable ending to his life. He might not even have a soul left to reincarnate. While being occupied in his thoughts, Ning Xuanma suddenly tugged at his sleeve. Divine Lord, what happened to Nianma? Shunjili looked at the water mirror and saw that Di Fui's body was undergoing abrupt, significant changes. Later, they saw that Gu Shijio had replaced Di Fui in rearranging the spiritual crystal. Meanwhile, the firmament stone was busy like a bee jumping from wrist to wrist. As Gu Shijio was busy rearranging the spiritual crystals, she did not see what had happened to Di Fui, who was behind her. Nevertheless, Shun Jiuli and Ning Xuemal witnessed everything. In the beginning, Di Fui was meditating. His Bodis veins were moving up and down like waves. It made Shun Jiuli's heart pound in his chest. For a moment, he thought that his son might even explode. Ning Xuemal was more nervous than him. Divine Lord, didn't you say that you had given him a pill that he could use to save his life? You told him to use it at the most critical moment. Why hasn't he used it yet? Shun Jiuli turned his attention to Gu Shijio and sighed. The pill has been given to someone else. Ning Xuemal kept silent then and there. She knew what had happened and could not help but sigh. This kid has no memories of his past lives, but he has always been good to his wife. The couple continued to observe the mirror, eager to help if they could. However, they could not do anything as they watched Di Fui slowly turn into a jade statue. Di Fui wanted to say something to Gu Shijio, but he could not speak anymore. The entire transformation happened in seconds. Ning Xuemal was stunned to the point where she felt that her heart had risen to her throat. Divine Lord, Ninma, Shun Jiuli stared at the jade statue, and he looked surprised too. It seemed that he did not see this coming. Chapter 2480. To verify the authenticity, was this kid? Was he going to discover his identity in advance? Ning Xuemal was terrified by the sight, and her eyes were reddened. She grabbed Shinjuli's sleeves and said, Divine Lord, what has happened to him? Xuemal, do you know how butterflies come from cocoons? Yes. The butterfly is merely a worm before it turns into a butterfly. Before it becomes a butterfly, it has to be enveloped by a cocoon. Why are you asking me this question at this time? Are you trying to suggest that this jade statue is his cocoon? Shun Jiuli nodded. You could say so. The man was curious whether Di Fui would recall his identity as the master of the heavenly law or Huang Tuesday. Who would he be? Ning Xuemal was a little relieved upon hearing Shun Jiuli's explanation. Nonetheless, she was still curious. When will he break out of the statue? Shun Jiuli did not know the answer, as this was his first time witnessing such an event. All he knew was that a butterfly would generally take a few days to break out of its cocoon. So perhaps Di Fui might also take a few days. Do you think Miss Gu is startled by the fact that our Nianma has become jade statue? Ning Xuemal was wondering what she would do to the statue. She didn't see Nianma actually change into a statue. What if she suspects that Nianma had been kidnapped? Or worse, will she crack open the jade statue to check if it is him? Shun Jiuli silently paid attention to Gu Zijia's actions. It was clear that Gu Shijio was surprised by the turn of events. Although she was trying to stay calm, it was evident from her fingers that she was trembling in fear. Although Ning Xuemal was worried that Gu Shijio might crack open the statue, seeing her worried for her son gave her a sense of delight. Simultaneously, she also felt like jumping in to tell Gu Shijio what was really going on. Fortunately, Gu Shijio did not crack open the jade statue. Instead, she began to remove his robe after some careful thought. Ning Xuemal was obviously shocked by her actions. Payak, along with the sound, the water mirror disappeared. Shun Jiuli had kept the mirror. It was inappropriate for them to watch any further. What was going on? Why did she strip off his clothes? To verify the authenticity of the statue. Shun Jiuli responded briefly. Ning Xuemal was speechless. Have they shared an intimate moment already? Xuemal, Nianma has grown up. Furthermore, they were originally husband and wife. It could be implied from these statements that the two of them had already been intimate with one another. No wonder when I look at Miss Gu, I could feel that something is not right. Is she pregnant? Ning Xuemal generally paid more attention to her son than to Gu Shijio. However, she did have a strange feeling that something was not right with her. Shun Jiuli seemed to have chalked all of a sudden. I didn't pay attention. How could he pay attention to the belly of his daughter-in-law? However, upon further contemplation, it could be true that Gu Shijio was pregnant. That would mean that Shun Jiuli would soon be a grandfather. That made him somewhat disappointed. Ning Xuemal pulled him up all of a sudden and said, Divine Lord, let's go and look for them. One of them has become a jade statue, while the other is pregnant. Furthermore, they are in such a dangerous environment. Shijio will not be able to protect them both. We have to help them. Shunjuli sighed. He had been hiding something from her, but decided to tell her the truth. Shuama, we came to this world by accident. It will be difficult to return to heaven, so I can only imagine that it is even harder to go to the Shura world. We might not be able to get there even in 6 months. Ning Shuama remained silent. Gu Shijio finally removed every piece of clothing from the jade statue. She saw the birthmark at the top of his thigh. Of course, inevitably, she also saw something that she probably should not have seen without permission. It was the same size as it was in her memory. The discovery was both terrifying and comforting at the same time. At least she knew that it was really him. All of a sudden, a vision came to her mind. Gu Shijio suddenly remembered removing the clothes off a jade statue. Hence, what she just did seemed to be a repeat of the past. Gu Shijio tried really hard to remember the scene because she had guessed that the jade statue from the past was also a real person. Perhaps that would give her a clue as to how to deal with her current predicament. She looked at the jade statue in front of her again, and a thought popped in her mind. Was Di Fui simply meditating? After verifying that the statue was really him, Gu Shijio was trying to put on his underwear. In the position that he was seated, it was rather easy for her to remove his clothes. However, it was quite tricky to wear it back for him, and she could not let him be naked the whole time. Although there were many sculptures of naked people, she did not want people to see Di Fui naked. In the end, she wrapped a piece of cloth around his lower body and temporarily stitched it with a thread. She was trying to sew it into a pair of trousers. However, she was not very skilled at using a needle, as Di Fui always dressed in fine clothing. The trousers that she sewed on were completely incomparable. In fact, it was considered rather ugly. Fortunately, Di Fui had worn a long robe over his body. Therefore, as long as he did not make any unnatural body movements, no one would be able to see the trousers inside. Upon placing Di Fui's robes back on his body, she stood in front of him and observed his jade-like face. It made her feel a little bit uneasy. If Di Fui had intentionally turned himself into a jade statue to meditate, would he not know that Gu Shijio had completely removed his clothing? Perhaps, like a real statue, his veins had hardened and his senses had disappeared. It would not surprise Gu Shijio if he had no awareness of what was happening around him. Having heaved a long sigh, Gu Shijio decided to think of her next plan of action. As danger awaited them with any wrong turn, she had to think about her next move very carefully. The people of Ligwa City were pleasantly surprised to find that the bloody rain that would have taunted them throughout the night had suddenly stopped at midnight. The bloody bats that periodically crashed into the wizardry barrier throughout the night had also reluctantly retreated as the bloody rain disappeared. Although the wizardry barrier around the city could protect the safety of the people in the town, the torrential blood rain, coupled with the vicious attacks from the bats, could occasionally cause the barrier to be broken. If that were to happen, the people in the area would surely face a disaster that could possibly even take their lives. Therefore, the people would stay vigilant throughout the nights when they expected the blood rain to pour. Needless to say, they were well aware that the rain had stopped abruptly. Everyone was surprised and also uncertain about what was going on. Many discussions were floating along the streets, with various questions and assumptions made. Less than an hour after the rain had stopped, the people on the streets witnessed a large explosion somewhere in the direction of where the city owner lived. It shook the whole city for a moment, and then and there they witnessed a rush of colorful lights into the sky. These lights seemed to have consumed the dark clouds that had initially occupied the sky. The sky was now blue with streaks of white clouds. Needless to say, the people of the city were stunned by the entire scene. Had the God in heaven finally seen the sufferings in the Shura world? And was that God here to save all beings? Even the young palace master, who had been tasked to search for Gu Shijio and others, was stunned. Suddenly, the people witnessed a statue rising in the midst of the colorful light. The statue was wearing a white coat that looked like snow, and its belt was fluttering in the wind, as if he was a god that was formed from the colorful light. As everyone was quite far away from the source of the light, they could not see the face of the god clearly. However, the scenes were shocking enough. Someone in the crowd suddenly screamed, "God! God has come to save us!" The status had caused a stir among the people. Some were in tears, while most had already kneeled. "God, please save us. I beg you to please save the Shuro world." Many others had chanted similar wishes. The people who were hiding in their homes had also emerged and requested for their savior. In their repeated chants, more and more people started to cry. In fact, it was so united that the cries echoed like a wave throughout the city. "Only you can save yourself." A voice seemed to come from the statue. The god they were groveling to had responded. Silence consumed the surrounding as the people fixed their eyes on the statue. The disastrous bloody rain and bloody bats were caused by evil spirits from a wicked array. Today, I have changed the array to benefit the people. You may come to the city owner's residence and see for yourself. There are a total of 9 evil arrays located underground in the 9 cities of the Shuro world. Spread this news to the other cities so that they can find the location of the evil array. While the voice was speaking, countless flyers seemed to be falling from the sky. Everyone naturally grabbed one to read. The young palace master and her people had initially hidden in the dark. However, they had to figure out what was going on as soon as they could so that they could inform Yanyanli. The young palace master shouted, "Who are you? How dare you confuse the people here?" She levitated into the sky and rushed towards the statue. "Haha, the authenticity of my statement will be verified once they find the other arrays." The godlike figure suddenly smiled and disappeared along with the colorful lights. The young palace master rushed to the position of the statue, but could not find anything there. Eventually, she looked down and was utterly stunned by what she saw. The residence of her master had been flipped over, revealing the starry array that was beneath it. Being Yun Yanli's confidant, the young palace master naturally knew the magical effect of this starry array, but she had not really been able to study it. She did not know the original order of the starry array either, so she would not have a clue of how to put everything back in place. The only thing she knew was that the cold grievances hovering in the starry array had disappeared. A glowing and positive aura replaced it. Someone had changed the starry array and had now exposed it publicly to the people. This was disastrous for the young palace master and his team. This is the work of the Devil King's followers. They are trying to deceive everyone. Do not believe what you had just heard. The Shuro world had been cursed for many years now, which had caused the weaker people to perish. Since only the fittest could survive, the people in the city were generally considered extraordinary people. They were talented and knowledgeable people, and some of them were even masters. It was not easy to fool them. Someone in the crowd suddenly spoke. "Whether it is true or false, we will know after we see it for ourselves. Everyone, let's go and check the array." With one order, countless people rushed to the house that shone with colorful light. The young palace master was speechless. She knew that something was not right. When Yun Yanli rushed back to Ligwa City, it was already noon. When he first entered the city, he found that something was wrong. Initially, people worshipped him at every corner. They would greet him respectfully and send him well wishes. However, after his starry array had been exposed, the people naturally doubted him. There was an air of hostility around them. There were still people who greeted him, but only a few. Furthermore, the streets would usually be bustling at this time of day, but it was rather cold and empty at this moment. Instead, it seemed like his house was the only busy place. His heart sank at the realization that something was wrong. But what had happened? At lightning speed, he flew over Tohi's official residence to survey the area. He was utterly shocked to find that his official residence was blown up, and his starry array, which had been buried deep underground, was now exposed to the public. Moreover, for some reason, a propitious light surrounded it. The people gathered around the starry array, questioning the young palace master and her people relentlessly. Yin Yanli secretly listened to their interrogations for a moment and finally understood. The people thought that this spiritual array was endowed to him by the god from heaven. It was an auspicious array that could save the world. It made the blood rain stop early, so it definitely had magical abilities. The people wanted to protect it and ensure that no one touched it. On the other hand, the young palace master claimed that this was a sinister array given by an evil person. She said they needed to do a thorough investigation. Nonetheless, the people of the city were unmoving and did not allow anyone to enter. Some of the city's dwellers were skilled masters in their own right. Therefore, there were certainly no pushovers. The young palace master tried to negotiate with them. She said that the array was beneath the official residence of the city's owner, and therefore, people should not station themselves there. Needless to say, her attempt to chase the people away was in vain. Frustrated, the young palace master knew that she might need to kill a few chickens to scare away the monkeys. Hence, she openly fired and killed a master who blocked her path. Unfortunately, her actions did not serve to scare them away. Instead, more people started to rally against them. To the onlookers, this matter was of utmost importance. It was more than just their own lives, since destroying the arrays could lead to the revitalization of the entire Shura world. Therefore, everyone was ready to fight for it. The two parties locked heads and started openly confronting one another to find the middle ground. While listening to the arguments between the two parties, Yin Yanli also took the opportunity to look at the starry array. His heart almost sank to the ground when he saw what had happened. It had completely changed. Yin Yanli could instantly tell that the pattern of the spiritual crystal arrangement had changed to the point where he did not even recognize it anymore. The culprit behind the array was still levitating in midair while contemplating his next move. He chose to come to the grounds and try to sort out the mess himself. After all, Yin Yanli was once a prince in the Upper Bound. With his noble identity, the people still admired him and found him somewhat mysterious. Perhaps he could fool them. Even though Yin Yanli was obviously exhausted from the wild and fruitless chase that he had been led on, he still cleaned up his appearance and carried himself well. His robe was fluttering in the wind when he fell from the sky, and a strong aura surrounded his body. The aura he emitted from his body was enough to keep the crowd silent. With his presence in the area, the young palace master and her team finally breathed an air of relief. Their savior had come. The palace master quickly came forward to greet him and bowed respectfully. However, the onlookers only looked at each other and did not bow to him for the first time. A lot of suspicious stares fell on him, which made Yin Yanli feel rather uncomfortable. He kept quiet, pretending not to be aware of the situation. He asked, "What happened here?" The young palace master started to elaborate on what had happened. She said that when they were searching for the culprit behind this evil array, the official residence exploded and exposed the starry array. She also noted that this unknown array was probably wicked and had to be sealed off from the public. The people jeered at that remark. They said that there was auspiciousness in this array, and it was this array that dispelled the blood rain and bloodbaths in advance. Collectively, they had sworn to protect this array with their lives, and nothing would move them. The two parties continued to scoff at each other's remarks to the point where they almost ended up fighting again. Yin Yanli listened quietly to the entire story and tried to appear as though he was impartial. He lifted his hand and demanded silence from the crowd. Once they kept quiet, he said, "Guys, I did not see the god that you were referring to, so I will not comment about that person for the time being. But this array, it was not the god who endowed you with the blessings. Ancient immortals had left it here more than 100 years ago, and it continues to be the source of power for the wizardry barrier that protects the city. Without it, the wizardry barrier would not exist. That being said, inheriting the array has been a serious responsibility. I had to continually replace the spiritual crystals inside it just so that it could maintain its normal operation. The spiritual crystals provided by all of you are used to maintain this array." With only a few sentences, he seemed to take credit for the array and its shielding properties. The dwellers of Ligua City, being experts in ranging fields, would not be easily convinced. Some people immediately questioned, City Owner Yun, we believe that this spiritual array existed since a long time ago, but its function seemed different from what you have mentioned. Otherwise, why didn't it put an end to the blood rain before? Why didn't it emit the clear light that it did to dispel the dark clouds? After the god changed the spiritual array, the blood rain stopped early, and now we do not even need the barrier. The crowd started to get rowdy again at that remark. Everyone had suffered from the calamity of the blood rain and bats. They had to change their lifestyles because of it and probably even lost the lives of few loved ones. Therefore, unless an absolutely concrete explanation could be given, they were not about to let things go. In fact, the way they had spoken to Yun Yanli was rather rude, which clearly gave away how they felt about him now. The young palace master was trying to stifle her anger. Her blood was boiling in her veins. She was indeed a loyal subordinate to Yun Yanli. She actually admired him as a person. Hence, she would not let anyone be disrespectful to him. She could still bear with it if someone insulted her, but if they insulted Yun Yanli, she would not stand there and do nothing about it. She pinched her fingers together, and a blue glow suddenly appeared in her palm. However, before she had time to do anything with it, Yun Yanli had grabbed her hand. Her heart jumped, and she quickly turned to look at him. Yun Yanli shook his head and sent her a directed audio. These people are still useful to us. Just pay attention to the few leaders who are blocking our way now. We will clean them up later. However, do not do anything now. The obedient young palace master did as told and remained silent. Meanwhile, Yun Yanli maintained his calm in a sea of chaos. Despite the mean things said to him by the public, he still remained calm and listened to the people. Over time, he could tell that the jeers from the crowd were getting milder. Perhaps, people were starting to feel uncertain about the situation. When the accusation stopped, Yun Yanli calmly said, Guys, I have carefully checked the array. This starry array has indeed been changed. However, in no way is it an improvement from before. Instead, it seems to be out of control. There were no evil spirits on the original spiritual crystals, but right now, all the crystals seem to be wrapped with a lot of the grievances. The so-called god that you saw earlier is very cunning. He wanted to provoke our relationship and take advantage of it. Yun Yanli then lifted his sleeves and seemed to chant a spell. A wave of white light flashed across the array, and almost instantly, the entangled grievances on the spiritual crystals became obvious. Although the spirits seemed to be rather tame, the crowd could definitely tell that they were present. Since the people could not see the spirits earlier, they were now shocked by what they saw and took a few abrupt steps back. This certainly caused a stir among the crowd, as they were dubious of what had actually happened and did not know if they could trust Yun Yanli. Seeing an opportunity to turn things around, Yun Yanli continued, In recent years, the devils have been eager to conquer our human world. The blood rain and bloodbaths are their despicable creations, but through our unity, we could work together to resist the devil's supernatural tricks for more than hundreds of years. Failing to defeat us, they have come up with a new evil plan to provoke our relationship and let us mess it up ourselves. Please, don't be fooled by the devil. Yesterday, the poisonous swamp had encountered a big problem. So I went there to investigate the situation and found that the people of the devil world were the culprits behind it. We also received a report saying that the people of the devil kingdom sneaked into our city last night and waited for the opportunity to destroy it. Therefore, I had asked my people to search the whole city for them. Then, they took this opportunity to destroy the starry array and try to frame it on me. Yun Yanli seemed to have devised his plan well. The logic behind each incident was consistent, and no one could find loopholes in it. It seemed to be airtight. Chapter 2485. Kuan Peng 2. The palace master was also very intelligent. Following his line of explanations, she said, Everyone, think about it. If the god that appeared last night was really an immortal who was sent from heaven to save human beings, why would he run away after he saw me? Obviously, he was guilty. However, because all of you confronted us, you gave him the opportunity to run away. In a way, part of the young palace master's explanations was true. The chaos in the city made it impossible for her to track Di Fui and Gu Shijio. It would appear that the master and the servant complemented each other in this situation. Furthermore, the presence of the evil spirits had certainly convinced some people that they were mistaken. The people who were still unconvinced continued to question Yin Yanli. They pointed out that the blood rain stopped abruptly in the middle of the night, which was something the array was never able to do. Among the public, there was an exorcist master who was present. Using some tests, he could assess the fierceness of the grievances. Being a rather direct man, he stood up and said, "City owner, I am an exorcist master. Although there are evil spirits attached to the crystals, the presence of these grievances is not new. It has been more than a month since these people were killed. Furthermore, it looks like someone has purified the grievances recently, which is rather odd. Finally, the overall nature of this array is indeed auspicious. Any evil spirits have been subdued." Yin Yanli paid attention to the man. He recognized that this person was a famous exorcist master in the city. Moreover, he was quite popular and had a good reputation among the people. In fact, Ash finished speaking, someone immediately agreed with him. Yin Yanli had to pause for a moment to carefully address his concern. He knew that if he did not carefully address the point he raised, he would lose the faith of his people. He smiled and asked, "Don't you find the spirits rather aggressive?" He suddenly lifted his sleeves and wrapped his arms around the man's shoulder. "I invite you to go and verify it yourself." Using a spell, the person was brought directly into the array. In the people's eyes, they only saw him use his sleeves to throw this person into the array. However, the innocent exorcist master felt as though he was attacked by a giant python. His internal organs were instantly displaced, and he could not even utter a word. In the array, he was stumbling about, as if some wicked spirits had taken control of his body when, in fact, he was suffering from severe pain. After a while, he seemed to have fallen on a spiritual crystal. The slumbering grievances smelled the food and immediately swooped toward the exorcist master. Sadly, the public witnessed the exorcist master being ripped apart. Utterly shocked by what they saw, everyone seemed to take a step back subconsciously. They did not want to be next. Yin Yanli dismissively asked, "Who here still does not believe that this is a vicious array?" Everyone retreated further. Watching the evil spirits eat up their acquaintance, they were no longer willing to question the truth of his statement. Yin Yanli continued, "Recently, the devils have gone rampant. Some people in our human world have secretly turned into spies for the devils and took the opportunity to confuse people. He is one of them. I have not interrogated him, and he actually came to me himself. What is the use of having such a person here? It is not good for the stability of our city." Playing this card naturally shocked the people. Moreover, they would not want to raise any conflicting points against Yin Yanli at this moment, as they were afraid to be seen to be working with the devil. Yin Yanli's eyes swept through the crowd, knowing that he had achieved his desired purpose. He smirked in his heart. Yin Yanli was a leader in the upper bound who was in charge of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Thus, he was good at playing politics. There had also been many thorns among the soldiers in the past. They either disappeared or grew to become loyal to Yin Yanli. No one else in the crowd dared to voice their concerns. Even though the people in the city were capable warriors, they were not stronger than the soldiers that the city owner had in place. It would not even be a challenge for Yin Yanli to end all of their lives. It seemed that the man from heaven had succeeded in manipulating his people once again. As he felt confident that he had achieved his goal, he decided to play the good cop role and comfort the people of the city. In a humble tone, he spoke, "Everyone can rest assured. I know that most people here are good people, and the reason why you chose to side with troublemakers is that you were confused by the situation. I do not blame you. However, the devils have installed many spies in our city. I will investigate the matter seriously and promptly take out the bad guys so that Ligwa City will be a harmonious place again." Yin Yanli wanted to make sure that he could arrest the city dwellers that had gone against him earlier. Furthermore, he knew that his strategy to silence the crowd worked. The man had basically stopped a riot before it even began. The young palace master looked at him with complete admiration. She truly respected him from the bottom of her heart. Unfortunately, since there were ordinary people amongst the crowd, some of them were naturally less intelligent than the rest. They insisted that Yin Yanli explain why the bloody rain stopped in the middle of the night. Although the rest of the people did not say anything, it was undeniable that they were also curious as to how the blood rain magically stopped. It was clear from their faces. Yin Yanli smirked, but finally provided them with an explanation. The blood rain and bloodbaths are extremely evil things. I suspect that the people from the Devil Kingdom created them. They want to take control of the Shura world. I believe that in order to confuse the people here, they sent someone to pretend to be God and pretend to rescue the people. To make it more convincing, they stopped the blood rain and bats. I have been investigating this matter for some time and found out that this strange and dangerous occurrence is somehow linked to the poisonous swamp. Thus, I sent our people over to investigate it. Upon discovering that the swamp was cursed, we used holy fire to destroy the wildland. Perhaps the blood rain had stopped abruptly because of the destruction of the poisonous swamp. Although Yin Yanli appeared to be done with his explanation, he seemed to think of something to add. I have also caught the sea dragon who is the custodian of the Devil King. He is the one who created the blood rain. He threw the net in his hand on the ground as proof. Kuan Zui's body could be seen lying inside the net. The crowd was surprised to see the creature. Naturally, they wondered if the sea dragon was really a custodian of the Devil King. It was certainly very beautiful. The captivated crowd wanted to determine the gender of the creature. They were really curious to learn more. The people in the Shura world were aware of the existence of a sea dragon in this world. Its shape was like a snake, but its head was like a tyrannosaurus. It was known to be extremely fierce and would only emerge when there was a storm. In fact, whenever people chanced upon it, a natural disaster seemed to have struck them. Hence, the people of the Shura world generally feared the creature. Never in their wildest imaginations had they expected it to be so beautiful. Kuan Shui had been woken up. He blinked and looked at everyone curiously too. His distinct watery eyes seemed to connect with everyone's eyes in the area. Although he was unaware of the nature of the situation, any onlooker could tell that the creature seemed to be smiling. However, what he uttered almost annoyed everyone there. What a group of idiots. The curious crowd turned indignant in just a moment. How could a sea dragon that was captured in a net and on the brink of death be so arrogant? After that snide remark, many people asked for this dragon to be killed, so as to send a warning to the devil tribe. Yin Yanli was also trying to use Kuan Shui to distract the crowd and perhaps even bring them back to his side. He was delighted by their reaction to the sea dragon's derogatory remark. Some people had started throwing stones and even rotten eggs at the creature as Yin Yanli stood there watching everything unfold. The net that Yin Yanli utilized to capture the creature was a very unique and powerful weapon. It was very flexible and could expand and contract at will. Furthermore, it was made of a highly rigid material, which would make it almost impossible for anyone to escape. Last but not least, this net could also absorb the spiritual power of the people in its grasp. So even if Yin Yanli released his captive, they could only beg for mercy at his feet. Blaming Kuan Shui for the recent events, Yin Yanli obviously despised the creature. Initially, he had cast a spell around him as an added layer of protection. However, in order to allow his people to vent their hatred at the creature, he lifted his sleeves and removed the protective layer. Therefore, the stones and rotten eggs that were thrown at Kuan Shui made him look disheveled. Strangely, Kuan Shui was not annoyed at all. He just put his arms under his chin and lay there in the net while taking the abuse. In fact, he even licked the egg and taunted them. Hey, I initially thought that you people were at least a little intellectual. However, it seems like all of you are just stupid. Everyone was even more annoyed by his last statement. Yin Yanli faintly said, Kuan Yunjan, don't attack my people. Now that your trick has been revealed, what do you have to say for yourself? Kuan Shui ignored him and continued to glance at the faces around him. In fact, to judge whether this array is good or bad is very simple. Let's see if there are any more bloodbaths and blood rain after 10 days. Also, since it is the source of power for the wizardry barrier over the city, other cities should also have it. If you all are free, you can go and have a look at the other arrays and see if there are any grievances on the spiritual crystals. People in the crowd seem to be finally coming to their senses. His statement was rather accurate. They could go and check the array in the other cities and compare it with the one here. If what Yin Yanli said was true, then they would know that he was not the culprit behind all these evil calamities in the Shura world. Some people in the crowd finally mustered the courage to ask, "City owner, perhaps you can speak to the owners of the other cities and ask them to check on their starry array. It will certainly clear any doubts that we currently have about the nature of this array." Yes, since the starry arrays are used to protect the city, they are naturally auspicious. Everyone will understand what we mean once they look at it. Everyone is actually very suspicious after yesterday night's incident. Any sorts of rumors could be spread around. If you can prove that other starry arrays are also auspicious, no one will ever doubt you again. They will also ignore the so-called god that came to Ligwa City earlier. The last few remarks echoed throughout the crowd. However, Yin Yanli did not seem to care. This is certainly possible, and I do not object to it. However, the other cities are quite far away from here. If you want to check on the other starry arrays, I strongly recommend that only 3 to 5 credible people go to a nearby city. After I am done with my official duties for the day, I can take them with me to a neighboring city to check. He spoke confidently and seemed unconcerned, which helped pull even more people to his side. Yin Yanli's sharp eyes then fell on Kuan Shui the moment he was done. He coldly said, "You, the devil's subordinate, I can't believe you are still trying to provoke my people in order to make us divided. I will never allow you to do so." Kuan Shui gave him a thumbs up as a response. "You are good at deceiving. When you asked everyone to recommend 3 to 5 people, you were thinking of bribing them, right? Even if you're not able to bribe all of them, you can just kill the disobedient ones off and report their death through some fake news. I'm sure these people would still believe you." Yin Yanli remained silent, but had a murderous look in his eyes. This sea dragon always exposed his wretched plans. Chapter 2488, Kuan Peng 5. Nonetheless, no matter how irritated he actually felt with the creature, he could conceal his emotions rather well. With a smile, he politely said, "Only you, the surviving member of the Devil clan, will gauge the heart of a gentleman with your own wicked measure. I will make sure that the chosen ones will go and return together." What do you have to say about that? Playing the game of politics, Yin Yanli clearly garnered the upper hand. This dragon likes to confuse right and wrong. That is right, Governor. The dragon has disguised itself as a beautiful creature to deceive us. We should turn it into its original form. The heated discussion continued. Among the crowd, Yin Yanli's men were cursing the loudest. They were eager for Kuan Shui to become the scapegoat and make their master the good guy again. Our governor is our real savior. Most of you are unaware that our governor is a descendant from the upper bound. His spiritual power is higher than that of a mighty immortal. He is here to investigate the cause behind Shura World's unusual blood rain that has been going on for years. Having tied everything back to the Devil clan, he wants to exterminate them once and for all. His goal is to give everyone here a peaceful life, the young palace master chimed in. Astonished, the people looked at Yin Yanli in disbelief. You have to believe what I have just said. How long has Governor Yin taken over Ligwa City? In just a short time, he has done so many good deeds for us. For example, the poisonous swamp no longer exists. He has even caught this evil dragon from the Devil clan so that it will not harm the innocent. The young palace master continued to brainwash the people. The news caused a stir in the crowd. Some suggested that Governor Yin should turn the dragon back to its original form so that it would not continue deceiving the people. Yin Yanli thought the same. He did not expose the dragon's original appearance earlier because he was concerned about its size and thought that it would not be convenient to carry such a gigantic creature around. Now that he had already returned to the city, it was time to use the dragon to build his fame. He put his fingers together and seemed to move it in a repetitive motion while looking at Kun Shui sternly. I will reveal your true appearance to the people. How dare a dragon challenge the peace and order of society? A streak of white light flashed and surrounded Kun Zui's entire body. The light was extremely bright that it could be blinding to those who stared at it the entire time. It seemed to have formed a light shield around the creature, and some form of spiritual power could be seen bouncing about within like streaks of lightning. The crowd waited breathlessly for the final form of the dragon, and as the light slowly faded, everyone was astonished by what they eventually saw. The spiritual net was there, but the creature was nowhere to be seen. Everyone gasped in astonishment. In fact, Yin Yanli was equally shocked. He could not believe that something so unexpected would occur after casting the same powerful spell that had worked like a charm every single time before. The true form of any beings would be easily revealed under the spell, but apparently, not this time. More worryingly, the dragon was nowhere to be seen. Had he run away? Yin Yanli took a step forward and lifted the net to have a closer look. It was empty. Determined, he decided to give the net a shake to see if the creature had turned invisible, but there was still nothing. The crowd looked at one another, at a loss of what to do. They quietly waited for an explanation from Yin Yanli. The man intended to show off his skills, but was forced to deal with embarrassment in the end. He was ready to cast another spell to search for the lost being's whereabouts, but was stopped by a sudden disruption. He looked up and was shocked to find that something had blocked out the sun. The crowd noticed that something was not right and looked up immediately. Oh no, what is that? A giant fish. What a huge fish! In the midst of daylight, a giant fish suddenly made a surprising entrance. The size of its body was almost mountainous, stretching across the sky in a prosperous golden color. Only a small part of its body was revealed. However, even without the head and the tail, people could still recognize that it was some sort of fish. Its fin moved a little to summon the shrieking wind that roared past the land. Rolls of dark clouds started to fill the sky, and in no time, torrential rain started to pour down on the people. Amidst the falling rain, the fish could be heard laughing. How could you call the man a celestial being when he could not even identify what I really am? All the man can do is to fool all of you mortals. The voice was coming from Kun Shui. Kun, it is a Kun. A panicked voice called out. Oh my, a Kun is a mythological creature. It is not a devil. Finally, someone who is not stupid. The Kun made a swift turn in the air and disappeared into the clouds almost instantaneously. The giant fish was no longer in sight, but a giant bird suddenly appeared that shimmered in golden rays. It waved its enormous pair of wings, and the gale immediately reached its crescendo as the ground began to shake and people started to lose their balance. With a thundering cry, the giant bird raced towards the edge of the sky and disappeared entirely. The crowd was absolutely stunned by what it had just witnessed. No one ever thought that they would be able to see this mythological creature in their lifetime. It was worth going through a hurricane to see it. The governor had publicly praised himself as a celestial being from the sky, and yet he mistook the mythological being as an ordinary dragon. All of a sudden, they started to lose faith in him. A Kun, just like Bai Zhe and Kirin, was a well-known mythological being. They were also known to be associated with gods rather than devils. So how can they be evil? Hence, what the governor said might not be true, after all. The young palace master was thoroughly annoyed, for her master's reputation was instantly tainted simply because this Kun made an appearance. She knew that these unruly people would definitely be suspicious of the governor again. She turned to look at Yin Yanli to see if he was all right and was shocked by his sudden leap into the air. Was he about to run away? Nonetheless, he left her a message before leaving. Lock the gate. No one is allowed to come in or leave the city. I will decide what to do when I return. Yin Yanli then disappeared in the thin air, as swift as a streak of lightning. Meanwhile, the young palace master knew what she had to do. No one would have known that a Kuin could possibly exist in the Shuro world. He had spared no effort in search of a mythological creature throughout his life, but was never successful. However, with his current predicament, he finally had the chance to tame a mythological creature. Yin Yanli's eyes glistened with a hopeful look. His hands slowly trembled in excitement, for he had finally found what he had been looking for. Determined, he used the most powerful tracking spell he knew and traveled at the greatest speed that he possibly could. He needed to find the creature and seize it alive. The creature was so powerful that flapping its wings seemed to cause a cyclone. He could be known both as Kuin and the Golden Winged Dapeng. Legend said that Kuin could travel for thousands of miles with one single flap. It was a false saying, however. The Golden Winged Dapeng was certainly very powerful and did not have to flap its wings too much to travel a great distance. Nonetheless, it was not as dramatic as what people had been told. It was still the fastest creature in the world, though, and not even the Kirin or the nine-tailed fox could compete with it. Although Kuin Shui was weak, his injury did not affect his speed. He knew that his speed was practically unparalleled. As for Yin Yanli, since his wicked plots had been publicly announced, he would need to come up with a new alibi to gain the people's trust again. Otherwise, the people of Ligwa City would definitely rise in rebellion against Yin Yanli, along with people from the other cities. Therefore, the golden-winged bird believed that Yin Yanli would not come after it and would have to save his revenge for later. Besides, he was not afraid of the man. It was not easy to capture him, anyway. Although the net that Yin Yanli used was a universal net that changed its size depending on the size of its prey, Kuin Shui could easily shrink to the size of an atom and escape. He did not struggle during the entire journey because he wanted to buy more time for Defuyus. Furthermore, he was curious about Yin Yanli's plan as well and thought that sticking with him was the best way to learn more. His curiosity had led him to the big revelation of Yin Yanli's wicked plan. Their fight was certainly an exhausting one. Moreover, Kuin Shui had been trapped in a magic net for an extended period of time, long enough to burn away 2/3 of his spiritual power. After traveling for 100 miles, he could feel that his injuries slowed him down a little. In order to stay under the radar, Kuin Shui retook his human form as he continued his journey in the air. He enjoyed how the wind caressed him and the freedom that he had from traveling at such speeds in the air. The mythological creature was on his way to reunite with Defui and tell him about the successful completion of the task assigned to him. Eager to share the news, he took out his directed audio spell and tried to contact Defui. Aside from sharing the good news, he was also wondering if Defui was suffering from the predicted outburst of spiritual power in his body. The call was not answered the first time, so he tried again. After a while, someone finally picked up the call. Kuin Shui eagerly spoke. "Master, I have not let you down. I kept Yin Yanli occupied for 16 hours. Before I left, I even exposed his plan publicly to the people of Ligwa City. I believe that he will be busy taking care of the mess there and will not have time for us. By the way, have you managed to overcome the matter related to the overflowing spiritual power in your body? You must stay strong and wait for me to return." It was clear from the tone of his voice that he was proud of his achievement. "Kuin Shui?" The voice of a woman replied. Kuin Shui was stunned, and his heart sank a little. He was often sent away from secret missions and would only contact Defui when absolutely necessary. Moreover, the directed audio spell was a very private item, so Defui would not usually give it away to someone else. What had happened? In a more solemn tone, he asked, "Miss Gu, what happened to the Devil King?" "He has gone into an isolated retreat," she softly said. She did not mean to lie, but some things should not be told over a call. Kuin Zuyi's mouth was ajar for a moment, for he could not believe that Defui would isolate himself at such a time. It did not seem like what Defui would normally do. Moreover, he was with the woman whom he needed to protect, so it did not make sense for him to abandon her. "May I have your location? I will join you soon." Gu Shijio roughly told him her whereabouts, and Kuin Shui obviously knew the place very well, so he made a quick calculation in his head. "Give me 15 minutes. I shall make my way there as soon as possible. Miss Gu, please take care of my master, he firmly said. Swiftly, he put the directed audio spell away and turned into his original form. With a flap of his wings, he soared and began his journey at unparalleled speed. As soon as he left, Yun Yanli appeared from behind the clouds. With a sigh, his nonchalant expression slowly broke into a smile. Since the Kuan was finally going to meet up with Di Fui and Gu Shijio, it would be his best shot to capture them all at once. Speedily, he went after Kuan Shui. While chasing after him, Yun Yanli felt lucky to have caught up with the creature and overheard his conversation. Although he did not hear every detail, he was relatively sure that he was going to reunite with the couple. Even while traveling at full speed, the Kuan was still very alert to every sound and movement around him, so Yun Yanli dared not get too close. He watched as the giant bird swept across the air and merely tailed it from a distance. However, all of a sudden, the bird changed its course and flew towards the south. After a few minutes, it turned southeast, and then after traveling for some time, it changed its course to the northeast direction. More than 30 minutes later, Yun Yanli realized that the mythological bird was actually flying in circles. What was going on? Was the motion in which he was flying a designated way to bypass Gu Zijius' wizardry barrier? Not knowing the actual reason behind the strange path, Yun Yanli decided to continue following the bird. 30 minutes later, he found himself still moving in a strange trail. Something was not right. Kuan Shui said that he would be with Gu Shijio and Di Fui in 15 minutes. It had been more than an hour. Had he been discovered? Yun Yanli decided to stop tailing the bird and determine his direction instead. However, in a sudden turn of events, the golden-winged bird turned around and rushed towards him at full speed. Surprised, Yun Yanli raised his hand and cast a dazzling streak of light towards the bird. The giant bird fluttered its wings quickly to generate a strong gust of wind that collided with his blinding streak of light. The two different forces opposed each other, creating powerful tremors that could be felt by anyone nearby. The giant bird seemed to have slanted to one side and was falling at a quick speed. Meanwhile, Yun Yanli moved back a little and steadied himself. It seemed that the giant bird had kept away its wings and transformed into its human form. Gracefully, his robes fluttered in the wind. Mr. Yun, are you unwilling to let me go? Why are you following me around like a stubborn wife going after her husband? Do you really want me so badly? In his human form, the creature had a unique look of a beautiful woman. However, the way he spoke was as hoarse as a man. Yun Yanli struggled to accept how to feel about it. You knew that I was following you from the beginning. Yun Yanli's tracking spell was usually good enough to keep him under the radar. He had never been discovered before, which made this his first ever failure. How did the Kuan manage to foil his plan? Perhaps lovers can understand each other without words. Kuan Shui then gave the man a few innocent winks. Governor Yun, you are certainly obsessed with me, aren't you? That explains why you refused to let me leave. The creature then smiled at him. Yun Yanli was no longer interested in this man's pointless talk that had only served to deceive him over and over. He simply acknowledged the creature with a condescending sneer. That is true. I really am in love with you. Now, let me show you how eager I am to get you. He waved his hand, and a sword immediately appeared in his palm. He aimed a sword at Kuan Shui and launched a series of deadly moves toward him. It was undoubtedly a ferocious attack, so Kuan Shui did not have time to respond to Yun Yanli's last statement. While attempting to avoid his attacks, Kuan Shui could tell that Yun Yanli intended to end his life this time around. In fact, Kuan Shui did not know that Yun Yanli had been tailing him. It was Gu Shijio who suddenly reminded him to be careful of Yun Yanli, as the man's nature was very unpredictable. Therefore, he became alert and pretended to take a longer route while trying to assess if the man was really following him. Soon, he was able to sense Yun Yanli's aura nearby. He was thankful for Gu Zijius' reminder. Otherwise, he would have brought the mad governor directly to Di Fui. He then circled the air a few times to confuse Yun Yanli before finally exposing him. He thought that Yin Yanli wanted him alive, so he was not worried about his safety. However, the current situation had proven otherwise. What had changed with Yin Yanli? Kuan Shui accidentally blurted his thoughts out loud while dodging the man's attacks. "Aren't you the Kuan? I have been looking for you for so long. I heard that there is a pearl inside each Kuan that can be refined and consumed. Apparently, it can help purify anyone's body. Hence, with the pearl, I will no longer need to worry about being obsessed with my practice." Yin Yanli had achieved his progress through the use of black magic. It was a shortcut without any proper foundation, so grievance and resentment would slowly accumulate in his body over time due to the wayward method. In fact, any tiny advancement in his spiritual power right now would crush every vein in his body, so he dared not take the risk. Shun Julie and his wife were both immortals of the highest rank, which was the 9th level for now. As for Yin Yanli, he was only at the 1st level of the same bracket, so his standards greatly differed from theirs. He could not even fight Ning Xuema, let alone Shun Julie. However, the situation would be different once he possessed the Pearl of the Kuan. The Pearl could erase all of the resentment that he carried through his dark practices, leaving him only with the purest source of spiritual power in his body. Therefore, he was determined to get the Pearl. He was suddenly not so keen about killing Di Fui and used all of his power to fight with Kuan Shui. Every strike launched was deadly, as he was hoping that he could kill the Kuan and retrieve the Pearl he desired. Although Kuan Shui was a mythological beast, his spiritual power was only at the level of a golden immortal, which was obviously no match to Yin Yanli, who had completely lost his mind. About 30 moves later, he was utterly defeated by Yin Yanli. There were significant injuries all over his body at this point. Kuan Shui was no longer able to fight. However, he still had a few tricks up his sleeve, which he had not utilized. His first thought was to shrink to the size of an atomic particle and escape. However, the spell did not quite work the way he intended, as his body did not shrink to the size that he wished. Instead, he only managed to reduce his size by half and turn into the size of a toddler. Astonished, he could hear Yin Yanli mocking him. "I know everything about the Kuan and have come prepared for all the ways to capture one. Kuan Yunjan, accept your defeat and give me the pearl now. If you cooperate, I may consider keeping your dead body intact. Otherwise, I will shatter it into pieces." He raised his hand, and another streak of golden light could be seen flashing towards Kuan Shui. This time, he was not simply creating a net. He aimed to kill. A net was launched toward Kuan Shui, but it was filled with enchanted needles that would penetrate his skin and poison his body. Judging from the ruthless attack from Yin Yanli, the poison would probably kill Kuan Shui immediately. The net was enormous, and there was no time for the creature to escape in his current condition. However, in the nick of time, a green figure flashed before his eyes right before the net touched him. The figure seemed to have pulled the mythological creature away. Swoosh! After a brief interruption, Kuan Shui disappeared into thin air. The empty venomous net fell from the sky. Yin Yanli was obviously furious that his attempt to tame a mythological creature ended up futile. The green figure is actually Gu Shijio. He did not expect her to show up just in time to save Di Fui's subordinate. He took a deep breath to calm his explosive rage. If she was here, Di Fui must be nearby, too. If he could find her, he could find Di Fui as well. With a swift turn, he began his search by tracing her aura. Gu Shijio flew as quickly as she could without stopping. After about a dozen teleportations, Gu Shijio brought Kuan Shui into a mountain covered by a dense forest. Among the greens, a stream twined across the valleys. Along the fertile banks were some natural boulders that stood against the current, forming a natural array formation. Gu Shijio quickly escaped into the array formation with her teleportation skill. She took a few quick turns between the boulders and ventured through every gap that they could fit. All Kuan Shui could see were stones flashing by like a dazzling light. Shortly after, Gu Shijio finally stopped to observe the creature's shrunken body. "Are you all right?" Koen Shui quickly withdrew his hand from hers and bowed to her. "Miss Gu, a pleasure to see you." He looked around and was confused. "Where is the Devil King?" At this moment, the creature had the face of an adult, but with the body of a toddler. It was not a pleasant sight by any means. Even Gu Shijio felt that it was rather weird. She was actually present when the creature flirted with Yun Yanli. He seemed to enjoy their brief encounter and was able to irritate Yun Yanli. However, his disproportionate body made him look rather odd now. "He is safe now," Gu Shijio only answered briefly. The fact that Di Fui had turned into a jade statue had to be kept confidential. It was easy for Gu Shijio to conceal the truth, as she did not need to lie. Di Fui was indeed safe. Gu Shijio had placed him safely in a secret cave, a place where Yun Yanli could never get close. After Di Fui was turned into a jade statue last night, she had immediately contacted Guardians Jin and Hua to blow up Yun Yanli's residence, thus revealing the starry formation that no longer bore the same look. While utilizing an invisibility spell, she carried Di Fui's statue in the air and pretended to be a celestial being that had just descended from above to serve as a savior to the people of Ligua City. Then, she left swiftly via teleportation. Gu Shijio had managed to escape from Ligua City reasonably easily because the young palace master had to deal with the chaos that she left behind. Guardian Hua had the carriage ready, so they quickly embarked on their secret journey back to the Devil Kingdom. Ligua City was tens of thousands of miles away from the Devil Kingdom. Furthermore, it was safe to assume that Yun Yanli had set up many obstacles along the way, so Gu Shijio had to keep a lookout the entire journey. To keep control over all the cities, Yun Yanli had some of his men traveling from city to city to inform one another about the latest affairs. The men also collected information to disseminate back to their leader. Therefore, Gu Shijio needed to think out of the box to keep her team onto the radar. She specifically asked Guardian Hua to get her a carriage that looked similar to what the young palace master's men would use. In the end, they decided to steal one of the wagons that belonged to the young palace master. Gu Shijio had to kill the men to seize the vehicle as a safety precaution. Guardian Hua took the disguise of one of the men that were dead, while Guardian Jin pretended to be the coachman. As a precautionary measure, Gu Shijio took the form of a male attendant. As for Di Fui, he was still a jade statue that sat quietly in the carriage. Along the way, they had encountered several stops, but were able to pass the security checks easily due to their perfect disguises. Guardian Hua had all the necessary travel permits with him and knew exactly where the checkpoints would be and when the people would change shifts. Hence, none of the inspections managed to pick up anything suspicious. The entire time, the two guardians were unaware that the jade statue was actually Di Fui. What Gu Shijio told them was that the Devil King had requested for the jade statue to be transported safely back to the Devil Kingdom. It was the most critical task, and failure was not an option. Both men agreed without further questions. To prevent any suspicions from the two guardians, Gu Shijio had requested for them to stay outside the carriage for most of the journey. Guardian Hua hardly spent any time in a wagon and would mostly stay outside with Guardian Jin, who was their coachman. He would only hide in the carriage whenever they were crossing the border checks. Gu Shijio was eager to keep the matter private as she was concerned that any unnecessary disruption would make Di Fui's situation worsen. In fact, she tried not to disturb him either, but would occasionally check his pulse to see if his vitals were returning. Unfortunately, she was disappointed every time that she checked. There were spies from the Devil Kingdom in every city in the Shuro world. They would send news to Gu Zijia's team from time to time. Guardian Jin would be the first to be notified. He would then pass the message on to Gu Shijio. Even while traveling the carriage away from Ligua City, she was still able to know what was happening in the city. She knew that Yun Yanli had returned. Upon learning this, she immediately asked Guardian Hua to turn around and race towards the mountainside. It would seem that Gu Shijio did not spend the past year traveling in the outside world for nothing. A year filled with travel was enough to get her familiar with many geographical features of the different places in the Shuro world. She learned that there was a very hidden cave in the mountain, so she decided to keep the jade statue in the cave. Guardians Jean and Hua were asked to keep the statue safe in the cave and wait for her instructions. That was the time when Kun Shui called. She immediately left the mountain using her teleportation technique. To be safe, she put a few paper dolls on the back of a few beasts and made them run around. This was merely a way to confuse Yin Yanli if he chose to go after her. She then went to another valley that was not too far away. The valley was rather empty, aside from the numerous boulders that were present. These boulders were fairly large and seemed to have already formed a unique array. She then called Kun Shui and asked him to guide Yin Yanli towards the valley. Gu Shijio was able to predict many things that had happened. However, she was not prepared to see Kun Zuya's body shrink this much. When they were finally hidden away in the stone array, Gu Shijio finally had the time to take a proper look at him and was shocked. Gu Shijio asked Kun Shui, "Are you able to return to your original form?" She had no issues against children. However, Kun Shui was still bearing the face of an adult, but had the body of a 7- or 8-year-old kid. Additionally, he looked somewhat like a hybrid between a man and a woman. Nonetheless, he was still somewhat cute. Kun Shui was severely injured at that time. It was already a miracle that he was still able to maintain his human figure despite his condition. Upon hearing Gu Zijia's request, he answered hesitantly, yes. Instantly, he abandoned his human-like form and turned into an enormous fish. The fish was gold in color, but bore the body of a whale and the head of a dolphin. It also had scarlet fins that were gently fluttering in the breeze. Its beautiful double eyelids further emphasized its big, round eyes. Every time it winked, its thick and curled lashes coming together like two pairs of waving fans. The fish supported itself upright with its fins. Like this. It tried hard to look at Gu Zijia's expression. Kun Shui knew that it looked more adorable in this form rather than that of a toddler. In fact, what Gu Shijio meant was for Kun Shui to look like an adult again. Due to its cuteness, she tried hard to suppress her urge to pet the fish. This is your original form? The fish winked at Gu Shijio and responded proudly, "Well, this is more or less how I look, except for the fact that I'm a bit smaller than my actual size. My original size could eclipse a mountain. It was already thousands of times smaller than its actual size." Gu Shijio suddenly recalled a phrase that she read a long time ago. In the north of the underworld, there is a fish known as the Kun, with an enormous body that stretches across thousands of miles. There was even an exaggeration for comic effect that went, "A small pot is not enough to contain the massive Kun. It has such great fins that one would need 2 barbecue racks to support the fish." Jokes aside, she never knew that the Kun's original form would be so beautiful. It looked more impressive than any other fish. Gu Shijio was fond of grilled fish and had consumed many types of exotic fish before. However, this fish was not something that she could grill and eat. Kun Shui noticed the unusual look in Gu Zijia's eyes, as if she was staring at her food. He quickly retreated. They had not met for long, so he barely knew anything about her. He only knew that she was the woman that Di Fui cared for. Hence, she was a woman that he could not mess with. The woman was also undeniably smart. So smart that he could not help but feel impressed by her quick-witted strategies. "Didn't you say that Yin Yanli planned to capture you alive? Why was he fighting you so aggressively this time?" Gu Shijio was perplexed by the nature of the battle. The fish was slouching on the ground while listening. Its fins fanned in a casual manner, which made it look relaxed. The trashy man was no longer interested in my beauty. He wanted the pearl inside me. Gu Shijio was speechless. However, she also knew that Yin Yanli was never interested in beauty. While clearing his throat, Kun Shui tried to think of a way to move past his awkward remark. The fish turned around and said with a sneer, "It seemed like he has always wanted the Kun pearl. He seems to know a lot about the nature of my species. Otherwise, the man would not have cast a specialized spell that could prevent any Kun from shrinking extensively." Gu Shijio agreed with a firm nod. Are there many Kuns in the world? She drew this hypothesis from Kuan Zui's statement. Kuan Shui briefly replied, "There will not be any mythological beasts like me in the Shura world where everything is scarce. I am from another world. I had traveled here by accident." A glimpse of hope shone in Gu Zijia's eyes. "You traveled here? Does that mean you can actually leave this place? How? Is there any gate that we can use?" She would prefer to take Di Fui out of the Shura world if there were any way to do so. The two would return someday to fight Yun Yanli when Di Fui was better. Kuan Shui was speechless. He coughed awkwardly to buy some time for his response. "About that, I did travel here, but I'm stuck here for the time being. I cannot leave before the right time comes for me to leave." In fact, he was only here by accident. Otherwise, a proud, mythological beast like him would not have wasted years in such a lousy place. He had been trying to escape for years, and during a battle with Di Fui, he had befriended the man and even became his follower. Di Fui had promised to help him leave the Shura world one day. That was a private agreement between the two parties, so Kuan Shui was not ready to share the secret with Gu Shijio. Therefore, he had to give her an equivocal reply. Nonetheless, Gu Shijio was smart enough to figure it out. "You have come here by accident and failed to find a way out, haven't you?" Kuan Shui did not know what to say. The lady had obviously figured it out. In a desperate attempt to keep the discussion from going further, he had to change the topic. "A Kuan always harbors bitter resentment towards anyone who has done us wrong and will seek revenge even for the smallest grievance. We are united and will strive to help one another when any of us is in trouble. I will make Yin Yanli pay for what he has done to me. Someday I will skin him and tear all of his muscles apart. Perhaps I will even leave his skin to dry so that I can enjoy some bacon." Gu Shijio had mixed feelings as she heard such an eerie remark coming out of the mouth of an utterly adorable fish. After a brief moment, she recalled the clothing that she had in her storage bag, which was made from the skin of a Kuan. She could not remember where the clothing came from, but she knew that she could not let Kuan Shui see it. She took a look at the golden skin on Kuan Zui's body, then thought about the Kuan Peng skin that she owned in charming blue. "Are all of you golden in color?" She tried to find out more. Perhaps the dress that she had was not made from the skin of an actual Kuan. The fish shook its head in disapproval. "Not necessarily. It largely depends on where we come from. It is just like how humans in different parts of the world have different clans that look somewhat different. However, the golden color skin tone is the most beautiful of all. The skin of a Kuan is a magical protective layer that comes in striking colors. Many great women who had reached the level of a great deity have always wanted to skin us to make beautiful clothes for themselves, but they would usually wind up dead and being skinned instead." Trembling, Gu Shijio decided to push the dress to the deepest part of her storage bag. "Are you really so powerful? How can you kill a great deity?" She was dubious over the Kun's remarks. "Absolutely. Each Kuan is born with an epitome of spiritual power. We can usually achieve the level of a great deity within 1,000 years, Kuan Shui proudly said. Gu Shijio tried to observe the fish and see if she could draw any clues. "In that case, are you still a young Kuan?" The fish's adorable appearance suddenly made sense. "I was already a great deity in the place where I used to be. There is something strange about the Shura world, though. Ever since I came here, my spiritual power has been depleting tremendously. The mythological beast only had the power of a golden immortal right now, which was certainly not a match for Yun Yanli. I'm already an adult," Kuan Shui concluded. "I am even eligible for marriage." Gu Shijio could not help but sympathize with the misfortune of the grown-up fish. "You are the only Kuan in the Shura world, aren't you? Therefore, you can only marry someone when you are finally out of this place." Kuan Shui shook his fins and said, "I do not necessarily have to marry my own species. After all, the same sea cannot contain two Kuns. One careless swipe can easily result in tsunamis." Gu Shijio was astonished by Kuan Zui's most recent remark. As she silently contemplated The creature seemed to be ready to say something to Gu Shijio. Feeling that his massive body would make it inconvenient for him to move around, he asked, "Miss Gu, may I return to my human form?" Of course." A handsome man immediately replaced the adorable fish. The man took a peek outside and remarked, "Yin Yanli is not even here yet." They were in the stone array for about half an hour. The mythological beast had roughly calculated Yin Yanli's speed and reckoned that he should be here by now. However, the entire place was still in its usual serenity. Gu Shijio took a look for herself and calmly said, "He is already here and has been listening to our conversation for 2 minutes." Kuan Shui said nothing more. Behind a large boulder on the outskirts of the formation, Yin Yanli heard his name being called out. Gu Shijio did not make the formation soundproof, so if anyone paid attention, they could easily hear any discussions even if they were situated outside the formation. Since Gu Shijio was very familiar with this array, she could tell when Yin Yanli had arrived. Yin Yanli wanted to quickly break into the formation at once, but stopped to listen to the conversation between Gu Shijio and Kuan Shui. He hid himself using an invisibility spell and tried to get more information first before making a move. In the end, all that he heard were useless pieces of information on how the fish planned to skin him, and that the fish was a well-grown Kuan that was looking for a lover. Yin Yanli was prepared to stay hidden a little longer, but Gu Shijio had exposed his presence to Kuan Shui. Kuan Shui teased, "It looks like Governor Yun is a coward. He has to hide himself despite his power. Yin Yanli, you're just playing hard to get, aren't you? Are you shy to face me? Or are you too afraid to face us?" Yin Yanli was completely annoyed. Apart from retrieving the pearl, he swore to skin Kuan Shui and shred his body into pieces. Since they knew that he was here, Yin Yanli no longer had any reason to hide. "Kuan Yinjian, I am coming for you. If I fail to skin you, I will change my name." Kuan Shui laughed out loud. "You can use mine. If you marry me, you can even have my surname as well." Gu Shijio burst out laughing at that last remark. Yin Yanli was a straight man and preferred to be direct when handling any matters. Gu Shijio knew him very well. Hence, his encounter with this wayward Kuan had been a painful exchange for the proud man. Bewildered, she started wondering if he could be homosexual. Yin Yanli decided to shut his mouth. Any further mockery would drive him crazy. All he wanted was to kill Kuan Shui and skip all this useless talk. From the outside, Yin Yanli could not see anything that happened between Gu Shijio and the mythological beast. He could only hear their voices. He took a look at the stone array and thought that it was merely an ordinary array formation. Being one of the strongest beings in the Shuro world, he did not see the need to take any precautions and boldly ventured into the unknown. However, as soon as he stepped past a certain point, everything around him suddenly changed dramatically. All the stones disappeared, and he found himself in a grand palace with glittering articles of gold and glamour everywhere. There was a sea of clouds outside, and a garden with magnificent flowers. Majestically carved pillars with jade inlays scattered the garden. This was his home in the upper bound. Not far from him was Lingxiao Hall. A couple could be seen embracing at the door. They were his parents, the previous celestial emperor and empress. Overwhelmed, Yin Yanli quickly paced towards the couple and kneeled before them. "Father, mother, you are both alive." The celestial emperor helped him up. "Lier, Yin Yanli, you may rise." Chapter 2497. Making a fool of each other. Although he was not the crown prince, his parents never treated him differently. When Yin Yanli was severely injured as a result of a catastrophe he experienced, he went into a coma for 10 days and 10 nights. For the whole time, his parents never left his side. He could clearly remember the happy tears they cried the moment his eyes opened. From then on, he made a promise to guard heaven with all that he could, even though he was not the crown prince that would one day succeed his father's kingdom. He tried his best to cultivate and to become a stronger man day by day. Eventually, he became the admiral in heaven who ran the entire fleet of 10,000 divine troops. He had become his father's proudest son and a leader that could not be taken lightly. Never had he thought that one day he would fall and become trapped in the Shiro world, a place that was devoid of any vitality. He struggled for a long time, but was finally able to leave. However, upon returning to heaven, he realized that everything had changed. Heaven had fallen into the hands of another emperor, and his parents were missing. He never gave up on the search for his parents, for he never believed that they were dead. Nonetheless, he could never find them. The lack of closure and obsession to find his parents slowly consumed him. To his surprise, he was able to see his parents again this time. All of a sudden, he was completely overwhelmed with nostalgia. Warm tears of excitement filled his eyes as soon as he kneeled before them. It was only his introverted nature that had stopped him from giving them a tight hug. When his dad had offered to help him up, everything felt so surreal to Yin Yanli. He wanted to stand, but was suddenly perplexed. The celestial emperor's hard, cold hand had forcibly pressed down on him with tremendous pressure. Something did not feel right, and Yin Yanli then realized that he was in an illusion. With that knowledge in mind, he immediately launched his first strike. The celestial emperor was pushed across the air, and a loud crashing sound ensued seconds later. The figure of his father was shattered into tiny pieces after the great collision. Stunned in disbelief, Yin Yanli watched as the grand palace disappeared instantaneously, along with his parents. He was still standing in the midst of the stone array and noticed that a massive stone was shattered into pieces. Yin Yanli's expression turned pale. Helplessly, his furious eyes turned towards the center of the array formation. Gu Shijio, I have never mistreated you. How could you do this to me? It pained him to have to speak this fact. She had used the array formation to uncover a wound that he had been hiding in the dim recesses of his mind. He would not be surprised if she challenged him in a physical fight, but he certainly had not expected her to use this dirty trick. Gu Shijio was equally surprised by the turn of events. The most powerful thing about the array formation was its ability to uncover one's strongest obsession and use it against them. It invited and trapped its prey by appearing to fulfill their deepest desires. It would usually distract the victim and lock them up in the array. Although Gu Shijio and Kuan Shui could not see the exact illusion that he was experiencing, they could still observe his reaction. Gu Shijio had always thought that power was Yin Yanli's biggest obsession. Surprisingly, it turned out that his parents were the ones he truly cared about. A sudden sense of guilt took her over by the sudden realization, and her heart momentarily ached for him. Despite being a clone, she had once experienced the love of being in a family. It did not last long, but the love and warmth that she received from her parents stayed with her. She looked at Kuan Shui and saw him casually leaning against a boulder with his chin cupped in his hands. Quietly, he was observing Yin Yanli. He seemed to have caught her curious eyes and answered her without even looking at her. Stop looking at me. My species is born to be alone. Our parents send us away at birth to run our own course. I do not even know what my parents look like. I also do not know how it feels to be loved by a family. Therefore, I cannot resonate with him. He shook his head and added, I thought you were his biggest obsession. What a surprise. Gu Shijio looked at him half smilingly and said, How could you think that I would be his obsession? Perhaps I should ask your master about it when we see him. Chapter 2498. Making a fool of each other. 2. Panicked, Kuan Shui quickly got up and apologized. Please don't. Miss Gu, please excuse my ignorance. I take back my words. Kuan Shui was no longer standing in a position of ease. Miss Gu, how long can you keep him trapped in the array? Gu Shijio made a guess. Perhaps a day. Kuan Shui was delighted by the response. Should we take this opportunity to escape? I have to stay behind to support the array. Otherwise, the formation cannot even keep him trapped for an hour. Gu Shijio crushed his hope for an escape. However, what made him curious was why they even wait for Yin Yanli to arrive in the first place. Kuan Shui assessed the situation and made a guess. Did you ask Guardians Jean and Hua to send the Devil King back while we keep Yin Yanli here? Yes, We're staying behind to buy them time. It will be enough if we keep Yin Yanli here for a day. Where are they now? Ku and Shui seemed relieved. Hesitantly, Gu Shijiu answered, They should be at Fengping City by now. We have to do our best and keep Yin Yanli here. As you know, Yin Yanli is the only man who can actually stop them. Great. We shall keep him here as long as we can. Both of them were communicating privately via their directed audio spells. Under normal circumstances, no one could hear what they said. However, Yin Yanli was not an ordinary man. His spiritual power had surpassed theirs, and overhearing directed audio messages was nothing for him. After a moment of deep, reflective thought, he smiled as he swept his eyes across the array formation. He suspected that as long as he stayed still, the array formation would not do him any harm. It would probably be difficult for him to move further into the center of the array, but exiting the formation should not be a challenge. He laughed out loud as he said, Shijiu, although you have done me wrong, I am still reluctant to make things difficult for you. If you insist on keeping the fish, fine. I shall let both of you go this time. He then turned and started rushing out of the array. However, what he did not expect was that leaving the array formation was just as difficult as coming in. He took one step in the opposite direction and was immediately trapped into another illusion. His parents appeared right before his eyes again. Luckily, he was prepared this time. He smacked his father and was finally able to break free from the illusion. Gu Shijiu seemed to have noticed that he had figured out the way to escape the illusions. She quickly tried to distract him. Yin Yanli, we are right here. Come for us if you dare. Swiftly, she leaped and teleported right in front of Yin Yanli to block his path. Yin Yanli locked his gaze on her face. He seemed to be conflicted for a moment. Very well then, Gu Shijiu. You will have to come with me. He said with a smile. Gu Shijiu was not in the mood for a fight. Instead, she took a few steps back and slowly approached the array formation. Yin Yanli was eager to catch her, but still could not gather the courage to make any deadly moves. Her spiritual power was no match to his, but her quick wits were nothing short of his tactical moves. She moved around constantly to make things difficult for him. Yin Yanli knew that he had to be ruthless if he really wanted to catch her. All of a sudden, Gu Shijiu suddenly tripped and fell into the array formation herself. Yin Yanli smiled evilly. He already knew that she was going to play weak to lure him into the array formation. It seemed that he had already figured out her intention. Pretentiously, he leaped towards the array formation but stopped abruptly before the entrance. Chapter 2499. Making a Fool of Each Other 3. Gu Shijiu, I dare you to come after me. He mocked her. After that, he turned around and disappeared into thin air. Meanwhile, Yin Yanli had actually ordered his men to set up additional checkpoints between Luguis City and the Devil Kingdom. However, he also knew that Di Fui and his escorts were too skilled to be caught. Yin Yanli was sure that they had masked their scents to keep themselves from being tracked. Without his help, his men would never be able to find Di Fui. He had to be there to do it himself. However, he wanted to obtain the Pearl of the Kuan first, but the fish was with Gu Shijiu inside the array formation. There was no way he could break through the formation to capture the two of them, and even if he could do it in a day, Gu Shijiu would be gone before he even saw them. She would probably set up another array formation for him to delay him again. Hence, going after her was not a wise plan, as it would take him another 3 to 5 days to break free from the endless cycles of cat-and-mouse games. Now that he was aware of Di Fui's whereabouts, the man should be his priority. With Di Fui in his hands, Gu Shijiu and Kuan Yunjian would definitely offer themselves before him. Having come to this realization, he chose to leave the place without wasting any time on the various illusions. He had also instructed his men to be vigilant and look out for Di Fui and his subordinates. Since Yin Yanli had left the place, Gu Shijiu could finally sit down and heave a sigh of relief. Kuan Shui looked at her and was noticeably worried. Do you think he overheard what we talked about? Gu Shijiu answered with a firm nod. Kuan Zui's face darkened. He must be going after the Devil King. Gu Shijio nodded again. Surely he is. Kuan Shui was even more worried now. We should go and stop him. He wanted to leave, but a sudden jolt kept him grounded. He then spat out a mouthful of blood. The creature's injuries were severe, and now was not the right time for him to enter into another fight. Gu Shijio quickly reassured him, stay calm. They're not in Fengping City. Kuan Shui was speechless. He finally realized her strategy and acknowledged, what you said to me via the directed audios were actually meant for him. How did you know that he was going to eavesdrop on us? Gu Shijio said with a smile. It was a bet. When she was still a mighty immortal, she could hear everything people said using their directed audio spells, so she bet that Yun Yanli could do the same. She was right. Astonished, Kuan Shui was trying to appreciate Gu Zijia's brilliant mind. With a thumb up, he paid her a compliment. You have used the illusion to trick him. What a great strategy. He looked around at the formation and sighed. What a waste for all your effort, though. It would be better if we could keep him grounded for a day. Gu Shijio shook her head in disapproval. Actually, this array formation could only keep him grounded for 4 hours in the best-case scenario. If he decided to crush the array formation by force, it would not even last 2 hours. Kuan Shui did not know what to say. He had to think about the overall situation before he could comment. Miss Gu, you really are the perfect match for the Devil King. Gu Shijio was obviously delighted to hear that. Very well said. We are certainly made for each other. Kuan Shui was speechless again. He never thought that the lady would be more thick-skinned than him. She was almost as good as Di Fui when it came to shameless self-praise. But one could not deny that the two of them were brilliant at devising detailed plans. Chapter 2500. Making a fool of each other. 4. Yun Yanli was rather unfortunate for having to deal with this quick-witted couple. Kuan Shui truly sympathized a little with Yun Yanli's misfortune. Gu Shijio was looking at Kuan Shui fixedly. She asked, based on your current position, shouldn't you be trapped in an illusion? Do you know how to get yourself out? Kuan Shui shook his head and answered proudly. I was born to be an expert in solving array formations. Also, not many array formations can keep a koan grounded. Thus, he could walk away from the stone formation easily. When did a koan possess such a hidden talent? With a sigh, Gu Shijio was relieved that the koan was on her side and not with Yun Yanli. Otherwise, she would not even stand a chance. Quickly, she studied Kuan Zui's body carefully. How bad is your injury? Can you fly? I'm still fine. I can fly if I try. Are we going to meet up with the Devil King right away? Gu Shijio examined his pulse and realized that he was suffering from some form of internal injury. She offered him a few pills. Take these pills and meditate for an hour. Your internal injury should be able to heal a little. I will tell you more when you recover. Kuan Shui did not go against her wishes. He consumed the pills at once and started meditating. Gu Shijio decided to follow him and meditated too. She needed to make sure that she was ready for the next battle. An hour later, Kuan Shui opened his eyes and noticed that his injury had indeed healed a little. He felt ready to fly. Kuan Shui thought that Gu Shijio would take him to meet with Di Fui right away. Instead, she asked him to take her to Fengping City to have a look. Kuan Shui was now wondering if Di Fui was really hiding somewhere in Fengping City. Gu Shijio noticed his skepticism and explained with a sigh, Yun Yanli is a prudent man, so we should keep the show going to prevent him from getting suspicious. Also, I do have some matters to attend to in Fengping City. Without wasting any time, Kuan Shui transformed into a giant bird and soared into the sky. Fengping City was about 5,000 miles away. Even in the form of a bird, Kuan Shui would still need 2 hours to get there. As soon as they left, a man emerged from the bushes. The man watched as the giant bird flew away and reported, Master, both of them have just left. From the direction that they traveled, I believe that they are heading towards Fengping City. On the other side of the call, Yun Yanli slowly kept away his directed audio spell as soon as he received the news. Utterly convinced, he began to travel as fast as he could. He did not turn around to catch Gu Shijio and Kuan Shui, for one of them could fly with great speed, and the other could teleport. It would be futile to chase after them. He should focus on Di Fui instead. Yin Yanli thought that Di Fui would be an easy target, so he activated his tracking spell. Upon arriving at Fengping City, his tracking spell had clearly shown no results of Di Fui. Determined, he continued to search every corner of the city painstakingly. Just when he thought that it must have been another one of Gu Zijia's tricks, he suddenly caught a tiny trace of Di Fui's scent. He quickly traced the scent, but found a donkey instead. Needless to say, Di Fui must be playing a game with him, too, in order to mislead him. Enraged, Yin Yanli immediately burst into anger. However, his search was not entirely in vain, as he knew that Di Fui could not be too far away. Therefore, he continued searching through the entire place tirelessly. After a long day, he had not found Di Fui, but did encounter a tiger, a wolf, an eagle, and a leopard. In fact, he had found many things except the person he really wanted, Di Fui. All of his attempts had been in vain, and he finally realized that he was fooled again. Based on his past experiences, he would even guess that Di Fui was never in Fengping City. Gu Shijio and the Kuan had tricked him into a frantic search. He took a deep breath and decided that he would not chase Di Fui endlessly. Di Fui would return to the Devil Kingdom sooner or later, and there was only one way in, which was located at the Black Desert in Suya City. He would send his troops there to wait for the right opportunity. In the next 8 days, he would secure the entrance with the tightest security. Anyone who wished to enter the Devil Kingdom would be apprehended. Furthermore, the blood rain would fall again in 8 days. Di Fui and Gu Shijio will definitely need to hide in one of the 9 cities if they are not able to enter the Devil Kingdom in time. Therefore, Yin Yanli immediately contacted all the governors in the different cities to strengthen their security. All members of the troop must travel in a group of 20 and above. Alarms should be sounded at once if something seems suspicious. All the governors had to take serious precautions to prevent Gu Zijius and her men from attacking any lone troops and then stealing the person's disguise. More sentries were posted to interrogate and examine all passers-by at every junction, whether alone or in groups. At this point, Yin Yanli was willing to kill thousands of Ophi's people just to make sure that Gu Shijio and her gang did not slip through his fingers. He had his men scattered in every corner of the Shuro world. It was only a matter of time before Di Fui fell into his trap. Everything was well arranged and in place. Yin Yanli had an evil grin on his face as he reflected on the concrete plan he devised. He did not believe that Di Fui and Gu Shijio could escape this time. The first day passed rather quietly. 3 days later, everything still seemed to be the same. 5 days had passed, and nothing happened either. But finally, the 7th day was upon them. Yin Yanli had grown anxious all these days. He was easily agitated, so all of his followers dared not get close to him. Instead, they tried their best to find what he wanted. To their dismay, Di Fui and Gu Shijio seemed to have vanished without a trace. In the very end, Yin Yanli finally thought of the ultimate move to make Gu Shijio surrender herself voluntarily, which was to abuse her people and use them as bait. He had planned to place her people under arrest for creating disorder in the society. However, as soon as the warrant went out, the young palace master immediately came back with a report that all of her people had disappeared 7 days ago. The disappearance happened the day when the so-called celestial being made an appearance. The streets were chaotic that night, so the young palace master and her men busy trying to return the order to the city. She received a report that night that many common people had left the city. Gu Zijia's people were among those runaways. As the frantic search for Di Fui had fairly occupied the young palace master, she hardly paid any attention to the missing commoners. After all, she never truly cared about them. However, upon receiving Yin Yanli's order, she sent out her men to find Gu Zijia's people, only to realize that they were all gone. Yin Yanli was obviously irritated by the report. He raised his hand and gave the young palace master a resounding slap on the face. "Why didn't you tell me about such a serious matter?" The young palace master kneeled quietly without saying anything. With a sigh, Yin Yanli decided to leave. "Bring your men. Meet me at Qingfeng Mountain, 200 miles east of Luohua City." He finally knew where Di Fui was hiding. They must be hiding in the valley of Qingfeng Mountain. It was where Gu Shijiao was trapped before. Gu Shijiao was present with the clan leader, who had brought the villagers back to the place where they had once hated so much. That night, Gu Shijiao had made direct contact with the clan leader to inform him about her current situation and that Yun Yanli might someday use the people against her. The clan leader was an experienced man, so he immediately knew what to do. The villagers did not possess any great powers, but were solidly united. Moreover, they respected the clan leader's every decision. Hence, the clan leader had gathered all of the villagers late at night and seized the chance to run away from the city while everything was in a mess. It was great timing for an escape, as the periodic blood of rain had just passed. After a year of struggling to survive in the city, most of the people had made good progress in their kung fu. Things were easier to handle as a group compared to before, for they were able to retreat and advance together on their journey to Qingfeng Valley. It took them only a night to cover the entire distance. When Yin Yanli finally ordered a complete shutdown in every city, they were already having a rest on the hills right outside of the valley. At that very moment, Gu Shijiao and Kuan Shui were dealing with Yin Yanli in the stone array, while Guardian Jin and Guardian Hua were transporting Di Fui to Suiya City. Suiya City was located at one end of the Shura world, while almost every troop was sent to Fengping City, which was in the completely opposite direction. Most of the security checks only focused on the carriages that traveled from Lugwa City towards the Devil Kingdom. They barely paid any attention to the carriages that went in the opposite direction. Therefore, the two escorts were able to pass every security check with ease. As for Gu Shijiao, after going around Fengping City to plant a few paper dolls with Di Fui sent to misguide Yin Yanli, she quickly raced towards Qingfeng Mountain. While Yin Yanli was still looking for Di Fui, Gu Shijiao was already with her people in Qingfeng Valley. A wizardry barrier had been set up to secure the border to prohibit anyone from leaving or entering the valley. Back in the days, it was Di Fui who managed to create a gate in the wizardry barrier by using a specific spell to lead the people out. When Di Fui performed the spell, Gu Shijiao was present, so she remembered every step. After reuniting with her people, she tried to perform the same spell again a few times, but was not successful. On the last try, she managed to recreate the same gate and guided them into the valley. Everything in the valley remained just the same as they last saw it. Ferocious beasts still rampaged through the forest. However, the people were not who they were before. This time they came back stronger. Fighting the beasts was no longer as difficult as it was before. They wanted to run through the forest on foot, but Kuan Shui was not willing to go through the trouble, so he offered to glide through the dangers from above in the form of the golden-winged Dapeng, while carrying everyone safely on his back. With just a few flaps, he managed to arrive at the cave. The villagers entered the cave one by one. It used to be the place where they were desperately trying to escape. However, it seemed like they had just arrived home again. Although the place was scarce of proper living conditions, they were able to live their lives together in solidarity and friendship, unlike those early days in the city. They had always thought that they were able to lead a good and fulfilling life. However, contrary to their expectations, their life in the city had been a precarious one. They were treated like the scum of society, and nothing in the city was better than what they originally had in the valley. Thus, most of them were happy to be back in the valley. Everyone returned to their huts and started living their lives in the most basic form again. The turquoise, rippling wavelets rolled gently against the shore, with sparkles of light gleaming on the surface of a lake that was as clear as a mirror. There was a white tent next to the lake. Its reflection could be seen in the clear water, creating a rather picturesque scene. Gu Shijio was sitting in front of the tent, with Di Fui's statue next to her. She was caught in a daze while staring at the statue blankly. Fui, when are you going to wake up? It has been 8 days. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.